Across deserts, jungles, and ocean floors, stone and metal stand where time should have erased them. These structures are not myths. They are measured, dated, and stubbornly real. Their scale defies the tools we assume were available. Their precision challenges our timelines, and their purpose remains unsettled. Who planned them? How were they built? And why do they appear in places that strain logistics even today? Tonight, we follow the evidence, marks on stone, patterns in alignment, gaps in the record, to examine ancient structures that press beyond modern understanding. Let's begin. On a broad rise in West Lothian, where the land gently lifts toward the sky, Cairnpapple Hill commands a quiet view of central Scotland. From its summit, the Firth of Forth glimmers to the east, while distant hills fade into a soft, persistent haze. Sheep move slowly across the grass, and the wind carries little sound beyond itself. At first glance, there is nothing dramatic here, just earth, stone, and sky. And yet, beneath this calm surface lies one of Scotland's most complex and enduring prehistoric sites. Cairnpapple Hill has been used, reshaped, and revisited for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests human activity here as early as 3,500 BCE, long before written history. The earliest known structure is a henge, a circular enclosure marked by standing stones and a surrounding ditch. Such monuments are often linked to ritual or ceremonial purposes, though their exact function remains uncertain. Why this hill was chosen and why it continued to matter for millennia is a question that lingers. Over time, the site evolved. Bronze Age cairns were constructed, some covering earlier features, as if later builders were deliberately anchoring themselves to the past. Stone cists, small burial chambers, were placed carefully within the hilltop, containing human remains, pottery, and tools. Each addition altered the landscape without erasing what came before. Cairnpapple became not a single monument, but a layered record of belief, memory, and intention. Mainstream archaeology views the hill as a ceremonial center, possibly tied to burial rites, seasonal gatherings, or social hierarchy. The repeated use of the same elevated location suggests continuity, an inherited significance passed down through generations. Alignments between stones and prominent landscape features hint at symbolic planning, though interpretations vary. Some researchers see cosmological meaning in the layout. Others caution that pattern seeking can outpace evidence. Yet, not all questions fit neatly into established frameworks. The standing stones at Cairnpapple are fewer than those once present, removed or fallen over time, making it difficult to reconstruct the original design. Were the stones markers of territory, memorials to the dead, or instruments for observing the heavens? Certain alignments appear to correspond loosely with solar events, but the data is fragmentary. Coincidence and intention remain hard to separate. More speculative theories have also emerged, often focusing on the hill's long-term importance. Why did different cultures, separated by centuries, return to the same exact summit? Some suggest the site held a kind of inherited sacred power, a place where the boundary between worlds felt thinner. Others point to the hill's commanding visibility, proposing it functioned as a signaling point or a node in a wider prehistoric network. These ideas remain unproven, but they persist because the site itself resists simple explanation. Even modern interventions raise questions. Excavations in the 20th century revealed the complexity of the hill, but they also altered it, encasing parts of the summit in protective structures. What was uncovered clarified certain timelines, yet also reminded researchers how much had already been lost: wooden features that decayed, rituals that left no trace, meanings that were never recorded. Standing on Cairnpapple Hill today, it is difficult not to sense the weight of time pressing upward through the soil. This was not a place built once and forgotten. It was returned to, reimagined, and reworked by people who may have felt they were engaging with something far older than themselves. Whether that something was tradition, astronomy, ancestral memory, or belief, we cannot say for certain. And perhaps that uncertainty is the point, an open space in the record, inviting us to ask what still lies unseen beneath the grass. From the quiet hilltop of Cairnpapple, where memory was layered gently over thousands of years, the trail of ancient construction leads us south, across land and sea, to another elevated place shaped by long-forgotten hands. Here, in the rolling plains of central Portugal, stone rises again with deliberate intent. The landscape changes, but the questions remain. Castro de Vila Nova de São Pedro sits on a low hill overlooking the Tagus River basin, its position offering wide visibility across fertile ground. Today, the site is calm, framed by open fields and distant ridgelines. The earth is dry, the stones sun-warmed, their edges softened by time. At first glance, the ruins appear modest. Low walls, circular outlines, fragments of fortification. But as with many ancient places, scale is deceptive. What survives above ground is only a fraction of what once stood here. Archaeological evidence places Vila Nova de São Pedro firmly within the Chalcolithic period, around the 3rd millennium BCE, a time when stone tools coexisted with early metalworking. This was not a temporary settlement. Excavations reveal multiple phases of construction, including thick stone walls, towers, and controlled entrances. Such features suggest planning, coordination, and a sustained communal effort. This was a fortified enclosure, carefully designed and repeatedly rebuilt. Mainstream interpretations describe the site as a defensive settlement or regional center, possibly controlling trade routes along the Tagus. The discovery of copper tools, exotic materials, and finely crafted ceramics supports the idea of long-distance exchange. These were not isolated people. They were connected, economically and culturally, to wider networks spreading across the Iberian Peninsula and beyond. Yet the architecture raises deeper questions. The fortifications are substantial, more complex than what might be expected from a small agrarian community. Circular walls were reinforced and modified over time, suggesting evolving needs or threats. But evidence of large-scale warfare is limited. If defense was the primary purpose, who or what required such preparation? Within the enclosure, traces of domestic life intermingle with signs of ritual activity. Certain areas appear deliberately structured, with repeated patterns that do not clearly serve practical functions. Some artifacts were placed rather than discarded, hinting at symbolic intent. Was this site only a place of residence, or did it serve another role entirely? As research progressed through the 20th century, Vila Nova de São Pedro began to stand out among Iberian prehistoric sites. Its continuity, complexity, and apparent importance seemed disproportionate to its size. Why did this hill become a focal point for generations? And why, after centuries of use, was it eventually abandoned? More speculative interpretations attempt to answer these gaps. Some researchers propose that the site functioned as a ceremonial or administrative hub, less a fortress and more a center of coordination. Others suggest that the repeated rebuilding reflects not just necessity, but tradition, an obligation to maintain a place considered foundational to group identity. In this view, the walls were as much symbolic boundaries as physical ones. There are also broader, more controversial ideas. Vila Nova de São Pedro has occasionally been discussed in relation to a network of prehistoric enclosures across Iberia, many sharing similar layouts and elevated positions. Could these sites have been connected in purpose, aligned by shared cosmological beliefs or territorial agreements now lost to time? The evidence is incomplete, and such theories remain open-ended, but they persist because conventional explanations leave room for doubt. The metallurgy found here deepens the mystery. Early copperworking requires specialized knowledge, sourcing ore, controlling heat, shaping tools. This implies skilled individuals and the transmission of complex techniques. How widely was this knowledge shared, and where did it originate? Was Vila Nova de São Pedro a recipient of innovation, or a contributor to it? Even the site's end raises questions. Around the mid-3rd millennium BCE, activity declines. The walls fall into disuse. Life shifts elsewhere. Climate change, social reorganization, or economic disruption are all plausible factors, yet none fully explain the timing or finality of the abandonment. The hill that once demanded so much effort was left behind, its purpose fulfilled, or perhaps forgotten. Today, standing among the remaining stones, it is difficult to determine where function ends and meaning begins. Vila Nova de São Pedro does not announce its secrets loudly. Instead, it offers fragments, walls without voices, tools without names, a plan without a key. Like so many ancient structures discovered beyond our modern understanding, it challenges us not with answers, but with persistence. What then did this place truly represent to those who built it, and what might still lie buried beneath the soil, waiting to be recognized? From the sun-bleached stones of Vila Nova de São Pedro, where walls once circled identity and memory, our journey continues east, following the recurring human impulse to build upward, to claim height, to shape permanence from stone. Beyond the plains of Iberia, past mountain corridors and ancient trade routes, another rise commands attention. This time it stands above the Ararat Plain, where history feels not buried, but layered in full view. Erebuni Fortress rises on the hill of Arenberg, overlooking what is now modern Yerevan. From this vantage point, the land stretches wide and open, framed by distant mountains and shifting light. The wind moves freely here, carrying dust, echoes, and the sense of long surveillance. At first glance, Erebuni appears firmly anchored in known history, a Urartian fortress founded in 782 BCE by King Argishti I, its name preserved in a stone inscription that leaves little doubt about its origin. And yet, as archaeologists peeled back the layers of the hill, the story grew more complicated. Beneath the clearly defined Urartian walls, massive stone foundations topped with mud brick, lie traces of earlier construction. These early stone phases are less orderly, less documented, and far more difficult to interpret. Their presence suggests that Arenberg was not an empty hill awaiting a king's command, but a place already shaped, already marked, before Urartu formalized it into an imperial stronghold. Mainstream archaeology acknowledges these earlier layers cautiously. Some are attributed to pre-Urartian occupation, small settlements, defensive outposts, or ritual use of the hill that predates written records. The stones themselves are rougher, their alignments less standardized. They do not conform neatly to the architectural language of Urartu, which was otherwise precise and symbolic. This discrepancy raises a quiet but persistent question. Who was here first, and why did this hill already matter? The location itself offers clues. Arenberg occupies a strategic position with visibility across fertile plains and access to water routes feeding into the Aras River system. Any group seeking control, military, economic, or symbolic, would have recognized its value. It is possible that Urartian engineers simply expanded upon an existing site, incorporating older foundations into a new political vision. History is full of such acts, conquerors inheriting sacred ground and reshaping it to assert continuity and dominance. But not all features fit comfortably within that explanation. Some early stone elements appear deliberately placed in ways that do not directly support fortification. Certain alignments and platforms seem disconnected from defensive logic. They are neither walls nor dwellings in the conventional sense. Their function remains uncertain, too substantial to be incidental, too ambiguous to classify. Were they structural experiments, ritual spaces, or remnants of an architectural tradition now lost? Within Urartian culture itself, Erebuni was more than a fortress. It functioned as an administrative and religious center, complete with temples dedicated to gods such as Haldi. Religion and statecraft were deeply intertwined, and construction often carried symbolic meaning. This opens the possibility that earlier phases of the hill were already regarded as significant, not just strategically but spiritually. Speculation begins quietly here. Some researchers suggest that Erin Bird may have been part of a much older sacred landscape, one recognized and reused across cultures. Armenia is rich in prehistoric sites, megalithic complexes, standing stones, and early observatories, many located on elevated ground. Could Erebuni's hill have belonged to this deeper tradition? There is no definitive proof, but the idea lingers because the pattern repeats elsewhere. The stones themselves deepen the ambiguity. Certain blocks in the lower layers show wear inconsistent with Urartian construction techniques. Their sourcing and shaping raise questions about earlier quarrying knowledge. Were these stones reused from an even older structure, now erased except for fragments embedded in later walls? If so, what kind of building preceded the fortress, and what purpose did it serve? As with many ancient sites, the written record is silent on these earliest phases. Urartian inscriptions speak confidently of foundation and conquest, but they rarely acknowledge what came before. Silence, in this case, may not indicate absence, only omission. What rulers choose not to record can be as revealing as what they celebrate. More speculative interpretations push further. Some propose that the hill's continued use across eras points to an enduring recognition of place, an understanding that certain locations possess qualities that transcend culture and time. Height, visibility, geological stability, even acoustics have all been suggested as factors. Others point to alignments between Erebuni and surrounding peaks, wondering whether early builders were responding to the landscape in ways we no longer fully grasp. These ideas remain unproven, and responsible scholarship keeps them at the margins. Yet they persist because the physical evidence resists final categorization. The early stone phases are there. They are measurable, excavated, and documented. What remains elusive is meaning. Erebuni is often presented as a beginning, the birth of Yerevan, a cornerstone of Armenian history. But the stones beneath challenge that narrative. They suggest not a beginning, but a continuation. A place remembered before it was named, used before it was claimed. Standing on Erin Bird today, one can trace walls built with confidence and authority, then step down, literally and figuratively, into older ground that offers no inscriptions, no declarations. Only stone, shaped by hands that left no record of their intent. Were they builders, watchers, worshippers, or simply the first to recognize that this hill demanded attention? As the sun sets over the plain and shadows stretch across the layered foundations, the question remains unresolved. Erebuni stands as both a historical landmark and a quiet provocation, asking whether what we call origins are truly beginnings, or merely the earliest stories we have managed to preserve. And beneath its foundations, the hill keeps its earlier answers out of reach, waiting. From the high ground of Erin Bird, where layers of stone blurred the line between origin and inheritance, the journey turns west again, back toward the Aegean world, where stone was shaped on a monumental scale and power was measured in walls. Here, in central Greece, another structure waits in near silence, vast in size yet strangely absent from popular memory. Its outline is not subtle, it is overwhelming. The Mycenaean Fort of Gla rises from what was once the floor of Lake Païsses in Boeotia. Today, the land is dry, flat, and open, but in the late Bronze Age it was a carefully engineered landscape of canals and reclaimed earth. Gla sits atop a rocky outcrop, its pale limestone walls stretching outward in sharp, angular lines. From above, the site looks less like a hilltop citadel and more like a stone enclosure imposed upon the plain, deliberate, immense, and unmistakably intentional. The scale is the first mystery. Enclosing an area of roughly 20 hectares, Gla is the largest known Mycenaean fortress, dwarfing even the famed citadels of Mycenae and Tiryns. Its cyclopean walls, built from massive limestone blocks fitted without mortar, still stand in long, jagged runs. 4 monumental gates once controlled access, each aligned with precision. The labor required to build this fortification would have been enormous, demanding centralized authority, planning, and sustained resources. Mainstream archaeology places Gla firmly within the Mycenaean palatial system of the 13th century BCE. It is often interpreted as a key administrative or military center connected to the drainage of Lake Païsses, a hydraulic project of remarkable sophistication. By controlling water flow through dams and canals, the Mycenaeans transformed marshland into fertile agricultural territory. Gla, positioned at the heart of this system, may have functioned as a fortified headquarters overseeing both production and defense. This explanation is compelling, supported by the discovery of storage areas, roads, and infrastructure linking Gla to nearby settlements such as Orchomenos. The fortress, in this view, was a node in a tightly managed landscape, part of a broader economic strategy. Yet even within this framework, questions arise. The enclosed space is vast, far larger than what appears necessary for administration alone. Much of the interior shows surprisingly little evidence of dense habitation. Why build so big, only to leave so much seemingly unused? Within the walls, remains of structures suggest organized planning, but not at a scale proportionate to the enclosure. Unlike Mycenae, Gla lacks the clear signature of elite residences or richly decorated megarons. Its layout feels functional, almost austere. Some scholars propose that much of the interior was intended for temporary use, housing troops, storing surplus, or sheltering populations during times of crisis. Others suggest that the fortress was never fully completed, its ambition exceeding its lifespan. The gates themselves invite closer attention. Each is massive, flanked by walls that funnel movement inward, emphasizing control and surveillance. The so-called North Gate and South Gate are particularly imposing, hinting at ceremonial as well as defensive roles. Were these gates simply practical features, or did they also project power, announcing authority to anyone approaching across the plain? More speculative interpretations begin here, not in defiance of evidence, but in response to its limits. Some researchers have questioned whether Gla's purpose was strictly Mycenaean at all. Could it represent a convergence of regional power, a shared installation used by multiple centers? Its size and relative isolation from major palatial hubs complicate simple classifications. There is also the matter of time. Gla appears to have had a relatively short period of use, possibly only a few decades before being abandoned around the time of the broader Late Bronze Age collapse. The walls were burned in places, suggesting destruction, yet there is little indication of prolonged siege or rebuilding. The fortress seems to have been both monumental and fleeting, a paradox in stone. Beyond conventional theories, fringe ideas occasionally surface, often focusing on the engineering of the Païsses system itself. The scale of water management, combined with the fortress's dimensions, has led some to wonder whether the project served purposes not fully understood: ritualized control of landscape, symbolic domination over nature, or responses to climatic instability. These ideas remain speculative, but they arise from genuine astonishment at the technical coordination involved. The stones of Gla do not speak, but they insist. They insist that a society capable of such construction was thinking in terms of scale, foresight, and collective effort far beyond what is often assumed. Whether as a military bastion, an administrative hub, or something more abstract, the fortress embodies intention without explanation. Walking along the walls today, one is struck by their endurance and their silence. The plain stretches outward, once water, now earth, its transformation still visible in subtle contours. Gla watches over it all, a structure built to command, yet now commanding only questions. Why here? Why so large? And why, after such effort, was it left behind? In the end, the Mycenaean Fort of Gla resists reduction. It is neither fully explained nor entirely mysterious. It occupies a space between certainty and speculation, where evidence outlines function but not meaning. And as with so many ancient structures discovered beyond our modern understanding, it leaves us standing at the edge of what we know, wondering whether its true purpose was ever meant to be obvious, or whether it was designed to outlast not just its builders, but our interpretations as well. From the dry plains of Boeotia, where the Mycenaean fortress of Gla stands as a vast, silent monument to centralized power, our journey continues across the Mediterranean, following the arc of ancient societies that built not only for survival, but for meaning. The next site we encounter shifts the landscape once more, from mainland stone to island limestone, from fortresses to settlements, from imperial ambition to communal endurance. Yet the questions remain similar. Why here? Why this form? And what does it reveal about the people who lived and left so much behind? The Talayotic settlement of Ses Païsses lies on the island of Majorca, part of the Balearic archipelago. The terrain here is gently rolling, a mix of scrub, fields, and low hills. The air carries the scent of earth and sea, and the light seems brighter, more direct, as if the island itself holds on to sunlight. Ses Païsses is not hidden, it is open to the sky. But its stone walls and circular structures create a sense of enclosure that feels almost intentional, as though the settlement was designed to hold not only people, but a way of life. At the center of the site is a large, thick-walled enclosure, its stones stacked with care. The outer walls are wide, almost defensive in appearance, and within them are smaller structures, circular houses, storage spaces, and passages that lead inward. The layout is complex, suggesting a community organized around shared spaces and collective functions. Yet the arrangement is not easily mapped onto familiar models of urban planning. It is, in many ways, its own architectural language. Ses Païsses is associated with the Talayotic culture, a prehistoric society that thrived in the Balearic Islands during the Late Bronze Age and Iron Age, roughly from 1000 BCE to 300 BCE. The term Talayot refers to the distinctive tower-like structures found across Majorca and Menorca. These stone towers are not quite fortresses, nor are they purely domestic. They occupy a middle ground that has long puzzled researchers. Mainstream archaeology interprets Ses Païsses as a fortified settlement, a place of residence that also served communal and defensive purposes. The thick outer walls and controlled entrances suggest that security was a concern. The presence of storage areas indicates organized agriculture and food management. The Talayotic people appear to have lived in tightly knit communities with shared labor and shared responsibility. Yet the site also hints at something more than practical survival. The central enclosure, with its monumental walls, resembles a ceremonial space as much as a defensive one. The inward-facing design creates a sense of containment and focus. What was the purpose of this inward orientation? Were the walls meant to protect against external threats, or to create a sacred boundary around communal life. Within the settlement, there are signs of daily activity, pottery fragments, animal bones, and tools. But there are also elements that suggest ritual practice. Certain stones are placed in ways that seem symbolic, not merely functional. Some spaces appear to have been used for gatherings or ceremonies, though the exact nature of those events remains unclear. The Talayotic culture did not leave written records, so interpretation relies heavily on material clues and careful inference. The towers, Talayots, add another layer of intrigue. Some are circular, others square, and many are located near settlements like Païsses. Their purpose has been debated for decades. Defensive lookout? Storage? A kind of communal symbol of identity? Or perhaps a marker of territorial boundaries? Theories abound, but none can be confirmed definitively. The very term Talayot speaks to the uncertainty, a name given to a structure whose original meaning has been lost to time. Païsses, like many Talayotic sites, also raises questions about the relationship between architecture and society. The settlement's design implies a strong sense of collective organization. The walls are not just protective, they define a shared space. The layout suggests that the community valued order, perhaps even hierarchy. But who led this community? Was leadership centralized or distributed among families or clans? The archaeological record offers hints, but not clear answers. More speculative theories have emerged around the Talayotic culture's apparent sophistication. Some researchers suggest that the Balearic Islands may have been more connected to wider Mediterranean networks than previously assumed. The presence of imported materials and the similarity of certain architectural features to other regions hint at contact, trade, and exchange of ideas. Could ces Païsses have been part of a larger maritime world, its people influenced by or influencing cultures across the sea? Other ideas focus on the possibility of astronomical knowledge. Some have proposed that the placement of talayots and other structures might align with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, or specific star patterns. The island's open skies would have made it a natural place for observation. But these interpretations remain speculative, and the evidence is often indirect. Still, the question persists. Did the Talayotic builders orient their stonework to the heavens, and if so, why? There is also the question of why these settlements eventually declined. By around 300 BCE, Talayotic culture had faded, replaced by new influences and populations. Was this due to conquest, climate change, economic shifts, or social transformation? The abandonment of sites like ces Païsses is not fully explained, and the silence of the record leaves room for uncertainty. Walking through ces Païsses today, the stone walls feel both familiar and alien. They are made of the same earth as the landscape, yet they form shapes that do not quite fit our expectations of ancient towns. The settlement seems to hold its own logic, a design language that once made perfect sense to its builders. The absence of written records makes the site speak in fragments, stone, soil, and shadow. And so we are left with the enduring question: what did ces Païsses mean to those who built it? Was it primarily a fortified community, a ceremonial center, or something that combined both functions in a way we have not yet fully understood? The stones offer clues, but not answers. In the quiet of the island wind, the settlement continues to keep its secrets, inviting us to wonder what else might be hidden beneath the surface of this ancient place. From the stone enclosures of ces Païsses, where walls seem to hold not just people, but a shared sense of purpose, we move now to the rugged northwest of the Iberian Peninsula. The landscape shifts again, this time to green hills, dense forests, and the Atlantic coast, where the air is cooler and the light softer. The setting changes, but the pattern remains. Ancient stone rising from the earth, quietly defying easy explanation. Castro de Coaña sits on a hill overlooking the valley of the river Navia in Asturias, Spain. The site is framed by a landscape that feels older than history itself: rolling hills, scattered oak groves, and the distant silhouette of mountains. The air carries the scent of wet earth and pine, and the ground is often damp underfoot, as if the land itself remembers the moisture of centuries. Here, the ruins of a castro emerge from the grass: circular and oval foundations, low stone walls, and the remains of terraces carved into the hillside. At first glance, Castro de Coaña resembles many other castros found throughout northwestern Iberia. These fortified settlements are typically dated to the Iron Age, and many continued to be used into the Roman period. The term castro itself comes from Latin, reflecting how later cultures interpreted these sites. The structures are generally circular, with stone houses clustered within defensive walls. Their locations are often elevated, suggesting a need for surveillance and protection. Mainstream archaeology places Castro de Coaña within this broader castro culture, attributing it to pre-Roman communities such as the Astures and the Cantabri. These societies are thought to have been organized in tribal groups, with castros serving as local centers of habitation, defense, and social life. The walls, terraces, and houses reflect a society that was both practical and resilient, adapted to the challenging terrain of the region. The layout of Coaña is typical in some ways, but distinctive in others. The settlement is organized in concentric circles, with a clear boundary formed by stone walls. Within, the remains of roundhouses suggest a dense community, with shared spaces and close proximity. The terraces carved into the hillside indicate sophisticated adaptation to the slope, maximizing usable land while maintaining defensive advantage. Yet the site also carries elements that are less easily categorized. Certain stone arrangements appear too deliberate to be merely structural. Some stones are positioned in ways that suggest symbolic meaning, or perhaps an intention to create a specific spatial experience. There are also hints of long-term occupation, with multiple phases of construction and renovation. This suggests that Coaña was not a temporary refuge, but a place of enduring importance. One of the most intriguing aspects of castro sites like Coaña is the way they combine defense and domestic life. The walls are not only protective but also communal, enclosing the shared world of the settlement. The circular houses, built closely together, create a sense of collective existence. Yet the reason for such clustering is not always clear. Was it purely practical, maximizing space and warmth, or did it reflect social structures, family groups, clan organization, or hierarchical systems? The presence of Roman influence adds another layer to the mystery. Many castros were abandoned or transformed during Roman expansion, yet some continued to be inhabited, adapted to new realities. At Coaña, evidence suggests that the site may have persisted into the Roman era, possibly incorporating Roman materials or influences. This raises questions about cultural continuity and resistance. Did the inhabitants resist Roman control, or did they integrate aspects of Roman life while maintaining their own traditions? More speculative theories also arise around the castro phenomenon. Some researchers have suggested that these settlements were not only defensive but also ritual centers, with the circular layout representing cosmological beliefs. The roundhouses could symbolize the world as understood by the community, with the walls marking the boundary between the familiar and the unknown. Such ideas are difficult to prove, yet they persist because the architecture seems to invite interpretation beyond mere practicality. Others have pointed to the strategic placement of castros like Coaña, often located near resources such as water, pasture, and trade routes. Could these sites have been part of a broader network of control and communication, connected through paths and signals across the hills? The idea of a regional system of settlements coordinated for defense or trade is plausible, yet the specifics remain uncertain and the archaeological record is incomplete. There is also the question of why some castros were abandoned while others continued. Was it due to conflict, environmental change, economic shifts, or social transformation? The landscape itself offers clues. Erosion, shifting rivers, and changing climate could have altered the viability of certain sites. But the human story remains obscured. The stones do not tell us why the people left, only that they did. Walking through Castro de Coaña today, one is struck by the way the ruins blend into the landscape. The walls rise gently from the grass, and the circular foundations echo the shape of the hill itself. The settlement seems to be both a part of the land and a separate, deliberate insertion into it. It is a place built to last, yet it also feels unfinished, as if something essential has been lost. In the quiet of the valley, the question remains: what did Castro de Coaña represent to those who lived here? Was it primarily a stronghold, a home, a symbol of identity, or something that combined all of these? And what stories remain buried beneath the soil, waiting to be uncovered? The Castro stands as a reminder that ancient structures can be both familiar and unknowable, constructed for everyday life yet leaving behind a mystery that endures. From the verdant hills of Asturias, where the Castro of Coaña rises like a quiet memory of a people who lived close to the land, our journey shifts once again, this time to the arid, sun-drenched southeast of the Iberian Peninsula. The landscape changes dramatically. Green gives way to ochre, and the gentle slopes of the Atlantic Northwest are replaced by the sharper, more exposed ridgelines of the Mediterranean interior. Yet the theme remains the same. Ancient communities chose specific places to build, and their choices continue to challenge our understanding. The El Argar culture is known primarily through its hilltop settlements, scattered across the region of Almeria in southeastern Spain. These sites sit on elevated ground, overlooking valleys and plains, their remains often visible as stone terraces and foundations clinging to the hillside. The air here is dry and warm, the sun relentless, and the terrain rugged. The hills themselves seem to hold the heat of centuries, as if the landscape has absorbed the presence of those who once lived here. What is striking about El Argar settlements is their density and their organization. Unlike many prehistoric communities that appear scattered or loosely structured, El Argar sites show a clear sense of planning. Houses were built in close proximity, often sharing walls, and arranged in a way that suggests an organized urban layout rather than a random cluster of dwellings. The settlements are typically enclosed or partially enclosed, with walls and terraces that define space and control movement. Mainstream archaeology dates the El Argar culture to the Bronze Age, roughly between 2200 and 1500 BCE. This was a period of significant social transformation in southeastern Iberia. The emergence of El Argar is often linked to advances in metallurgy, particularly bronze production, which required specialized skills and access to copper and tin. The region was rich in mineral resources, and the control of these resources likely played a central role in the development of social hierarchy and economic power. El Argar settlements often reveal evidence of centralized authority. The layout of some sites suggests social stratification, with larger, more complex structures interpreted as elite residences or administrative centers. Burial practices also point to inequality, with some tombs containing rich grave goods while others are relatively modest. These findings support the idea of a society organized around power, wealth, and control of resources. Yet even within this framework, El Argar remains puzzling. The level of organization and the apparent centralization suggest a society more complex than many contemporaries in the region. How did this society emerge so quickly, and why did it develop such a distinct pattern of settlement? the answer is not fully known. Some researchers propose that external influences, trade, migration, or contact with Mediterranean civilizations played a role. Others argue for internal innovation, driven by the need to manage resources and defend against competition. The architecture itself raises further questions. The settlements often include multi-room houses, storage spaces, and complex interior divisions, indicating sophisticated domestic life. The use of terraces and retaining walls shows advanced engineering adapted to the challenging terrain. Yet there is a notable absence of monumental public buildings. Unlike other ancient societies, El Argar does not present obvious temples or palaces. The power structures, if they existed, were not expressed through grand architecture in the way we might expect. This absence has led to more speculative interpretations. Some suggest that El Argar society may have been organized around a different kind of authority, one less focused on monumental display and more on control of resources, production, and social order. Could the power have been exercised through the management of bronze production, food storage, and distribution, rather than through visible symbols of dominance? The architecture hints at efficiency and control, but not necessarily spectacle. There are also questions about the abrupt end of the El Argar culture. Around 1500 BCE, the settlements were largely abandoned, and the distinctive cultural patterns disappeared. The reasons for this collapse are debated. Some point to environmental factors, drought, soil depletion, or changes in climate that made the region less sustainable. Others suggest social upheaval, conflict, or external pressure from other groups. The truth may be a combination of factors, but the suddenness of the decline remains striking. More fringe theories sometimes propose that El Argar's disappearance was linked to catastrophic events or external invasion, though these ideas lack solid evidence. What is clear, however, is that the end of El Argar was not gradual. The culture seems to have vanished in a way that suggests rapid change. What happens to a society when the system that supports it collapses? And what traces remain when a civilization disappears so completely? One of the most compelling aspects of El Argar settlements is the way they challenge our assumptions about Bronze Age societies. The level of organization, the density of settlement, and the evidence of social stratification suggest a civilization that was more advanced and more centralized than often acknowledged. Yet the lack of monumental architecture and the sudden disappearance create a paradox. It is as if El Argar built a sophisticated society and then chose, or was forced, to erase it. Walking among the terraces and foundations of an El Argar settlement today, it is easy to feel the remnants of that paradox. The stones are not merely ruins, they are evidence of a deliberate and complex way of life. The settlements speak of planning, labor, and social order, but they also speak of absence, of a culture that flourished and then faded, leaving behind only the shapes of its homes and the faint traces of its daily life. In the quiet of the hillside, the question remains, what did El Argar truly represent to its people, and why did it end so abruptly? Was it a civilization built on resource control, a society shaped by the demands of metallurgy and trade, or something even more complex? And what might still be hidden beneath the terraces, waiting to reveal the missing pieces of a story that remains only partially told? From the sun-baked terraces of the El Argar settlements, where organized stone and sudden disappearance create a lingering sense of unfinished history, our journey turns again, this time northward, back toward the heart of the Iberian Peninsula. The landscape changes once more, from the arid southeast to the cooler, more wooded highlands of central Spain. Yet the pattern persists. Ancient communities choosing heights, building in stone, and leaving behind structures that continue to challenge modern understanding. Castro de Ulaca sits on a high plateau in the province of Avila, within the region of Castilla y León. The site crowns a rocky outcrop, surrounded by vast expanses of countryside. From this elevated position, the view is broad and uninterrupted, stretching across rolling hills and distant mountains. The air is crisp, the light sharp, and the wind often moves with a steady, almost deliberate rhythm. Here, the remains of a large fortified settlement emerge from the landscape. Stone walls, terraces, and the foundations of circular dwellings. At first glance, Castro de Ulaca shares common features with other castros of northwestern Iberia. Circular houses, defensive walls, and a location chosen for visibility and protection. But Ulaca is different in scale and in the complexity of its fortifications. The site is unusually large for a castro, with multiple lines of walls and a layout that suggests careful planning and substantial labor. The fortifications are not merely functional. They are imposing, designed to control movement and to signal strength. Mainstream archaeology associates Ulaca with the Vettones, an Iron Age people who inhabited this region before Roman conquest. The Vettones are often described as a tribal society with strong martial traditions. Castros like Ulaca are typically seen as fortified settlements that provided refuge and control over territory. The Vettones are also known for their distinctive granite sculptures, statues of bulls and pigs found in the region, which suggest a culture with symbolic or ritual practices tied to animal imagery. Ulaca's walls are built from local stone, fitted together with skill. Some sections appear to have been reinforced or rebuilt over time, indicating long-term occupation and ongoing maintenance. The interior contains evidence of dwellings arranged in a way that suggests community organization rather than random placement. The settlement seems to have been more than a temporary refuge. It was a center of life, perhaps for generations. Yet even with these mainstream explanations, Ulaca presents puzzles. The scale of the fortifications is larger than many comparable sites, raising questions about the resources and social organization required to build them. What kind of authority could mobilize the labor needed for such construction? Was Ulaca the seat of a powerful local chief, or did it serve as a communal stronghold shared by multiple groups? The size of the site also suggests that it may have served a broader function than simple defense. Some researchers propose that Ulaca could have been a regional center, a place where communities gathered for trade, rituals, or political meetings. The presence of nearby sacred landscapes, including natural formations and animal sculptures, hints at a deeper cultural context. Was Ulaca part of a network of places that structured Vettonian life, connecting daily existence with spiritual practice? One of the most intriguing features of Ulaca is its strategic location. The plateau is not only defensible, but it also commands a view over routes that would have been important for movement and communication. The site's position suggests an awareness of territorial control and the importance of monitoring the surrounding land. But was this control purely military, or did it also involve economic oversight of herds, agriculture, and trade? The Vettones were known as cattle herders, and their economy likely relied heavily on livestock. The open plateau around Ulaca would have provided pasture land, while the fortified settlement offered protection for people and resources. Yet, the settlement's size still seems disproportionate to a purely pastoral community. The effort invested in stone walls and terraces suggests a society that valued permanence, stability, and perhaps a shared identity tied to the place itself. More speculative interpretations sometimes connect Ulaca to broader prehistoric traditions. The presence of granite sculptures in the region has led some to suggest that the Vettones had a rich symbolic world, possibly linked to ancestor worship or animal cults. Could Ulaca have been not just a settlement, but a sacred center, where the living and the spiritual worlds intersected? The stones do not confirm this, but they do not deny it either. Another speculative idea relates to the site's endurance. Ulaca was occupied for a long period, yet it was eventually abandoned, like many ancient settlements. Was this due to Roman conquest, social transformation, or environmental change? The Roman expansion certainly reshaped the region, but the transition was not always immediate or uniform. Did the people of Ulaca leave gradually, or did they depart suddenly? The archaeological record offers hints, but no clear story. Walking through Ulaca today, the walls rise from the earth with a quiet authority. The circular foundations suggest lives lived in close proximity, in a community bound by shared space and shared purpose. The stones seem to ask questions without speaking. Who built this? What did they fear? What did they protect? And why, after such investment, did they leave? In the stillness of the plateau, the mystery remains. Castro de Ulaca is both familiar and strange, an ancient settlement that fits within the Castro tradition, yet exceeds it in scale and complexity. It is a place where defense, community, and possibly ritual may have intersected, leaving behind a structure that continues to challenge our assumptions. And as the wind moves across the stone walls, we are left with the same question that has followed us through each site. What else lies hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be understood? From the windswept plateau of Ulaca, where stone walls and circular foundations rise from the earth like the remnants of a long-held promise, our journey once again shifts northward, toward the islands that sit between the Atlantic and the North Sea. The landscape changes dramatically, from the high plains of central Spain to the rugged coastlines of Scotland, where weather and water have shaped both land and history. Yet, the pattern remains the same. Ancient builders chose specific places for reasons that continue to elude us, and their structures remain as silent witnesses to lives we can only partially reconstruct. The Broch of Clickimin sits at the edge of Lerwick, on the Shetland mainland, where the sea meets the land in a sharp, often stormy embrace. The site occupies a small promontory, surrounded by water on three sides, with a narrow causeway connecting it to the shore. From a distance, the Broch appears as a dark, circular mound, its walls rising with a deliberate, imposing presence. The stonework is thick and heavy, built to withstand both time and the elements. The air here is cold and salty, and the wind moves with a steady force, as if the landscape itself is breathing. Brochs are among the most distinctive and enigmatic structures of Iron Age Scotland. They are tall, round towers built with massive double walls, often containing internal stairways and chambers. Their purpose has been debated for centuries. Some see them as defensive structures, fortresses designed to protect communities from external threats. Others view them as status symbols, expressions of power and wealth. Still others suggest they were communal dwellings, housing extended families in a centralized, controlled space. Clickimin is one of the best preserved Broch sites, and it offers a particularly complex picture. The Broch itself is surrounded by an outer wall, forming an enclosed area that suggests additional layers of defense. Within the enclosure are traces of ancillary buildings, structures that likely served domestic or practical purposes. The causeway connecting the Broch to the mainland is narrow and controlled, implying that access could be restricted if needed. Mainstream archaeology generally places the construction of Clickimin Broch in the 1st centuries BCE, during a period of significant social change in northern Scotland. The Broch's architecture, its double walls, thick masonry, and internal features reflects advanced engineering and an understanding of structural stability. The site's location, on a promontory surrounded by water, also suggests strategic thinking, visibility, control of approach, and a natural barrier against intrusion. Yet, even with these explanations, Clickimin raises questions that are difficult to answer fully. The Broch's scale and complexity suggest a society capable of organized labor and specialized knowledge. building such a structure would require planning, coordination, and resources. What kind of social system could support this? Was it a centralized authority, perhaps a local chieftain, or a communal effort driven by shared necessity? The presence of the outer enclosure complicates the picture. If the Broch itself was a defensible residence, why was an additional wall necessary? Some researchers suggest that the outer enclosure served as a protected area for livestock, storage, or workspaces, while the Broch functioned as a fortified home. Others propose that the enclosure indicates a larger settlement, with the Broch serving as a focal point or symbol of authority. But the exact relationship between the Broch and its surroundings remains unclear. More intriguing are the less tangible aspects of the site. Brochs, including Clickimin, often appear in locations that feel symbolic as much as strategic. They are frequently placed on headlands, promontories, or other prominent landscape features, as if to announce presence and control. In this sense, Brochs may have served as markers of identity, signaling territory and status. But what exactly were they marking? And to whom were they meant to send that message? Some speculative theories suggest that Brochs may have had ritual or ceremonial functions, at least in part. The circular design, the thick walls, and the controlled entrances create a sense of boundary and separation. Could the Broch have represented a sacred center, a place where the living interacted with the spiritual or ancestral world? The evidence for this is limited, but the idea persists because the architecture seems to invite interpretation beyond the purely practical. Other theories focus on the possibility of Brochs as symbols of resistance. In a landscape marked by harsh conditions and external pressures, Brochs may have represented a way for communities to assert autonomy and stability. The sheer effort required to build such structures could have been a statement of resilience, an assertion that a group belonged to this land and would remain. Clickimin's setting also raises questions about the relationship between the Broch and the sea. The promontory offers a clear view of the surrounding waters, and the causeway suggests a controlled connection to the mainland. Did the Broch function as a watchtower for maritime activity? Was it part of a network of coastal sites monitoring travel and trade? Or was the sea itself a boundary, a deliberate separation from the world beyond? The Broch's abandonment is another layer of mystery. Like many ancient structures, Clickimin was eventually left behind. The reasons for this are not fully understood. Did the social conditions that required such a structure change? Did the community move, merge with others, or transform into a different kind of settlement? The stone walls remain, but the people who built them are gone. Walking around Clickimin today, the Broch's walls rise with a quiet, stubborn presence. The site feels both protected and isolated, a place designed to be seen and yet to control what is seen. The stones bear the marks of time and weather, but they also bear the weight of human intention. They ask us to consider what kind of world required such a structure, and what kind of world moved on without it. In the stillness of the Shetland air, the mystery of Clickimin remains. Was it a fortress, a status symbol, a communal home, or something more complex? A place where power, identity, and survival converged. The Broch offers clues, but not a complete story. And as the wind moves across the promontory, we are left with the same question that has followed us from site to site. What else lies hidden beneath the stone, waiting to be understood? From the rocky promontory of Clickimin, where the Broch's walls rise like a deliberate challenge to the sea and the wind, our journey moves south again, back to the Iberian Peninsula, where the story of ancient engineering and settlement continues to deepen. The landscape changes once more, from the sharp coastlines of Shetland to the broad sunlit plains of central Spain. Here, the land is flatter, the horizon wider, and the heat more persistent. Yet the pattern remains. Ancient communities building in stone, shaping the terrain, and leaving structures that continue to puzzle modern understanding. Motilla del Azuer stands in the La Mancha region of Spain, in the province of Ciudad Real. The site sits on a slight rise within a flat, open plain surrounded by agricultural land. Today, the fields stretch outward in a broad expanse, their colors shifting with the seasons. In the distance, the horizon is marked by low hills, and the sky seems to hold itself open, vast and unbroken. Motilla del Azuer appears as a circular mound, its shape rising gently from the plain like a deliberate interruption in the landscape. The remains of a fortified structure, walls, terraces, and interior spaces, suggest a site built with intention and purpose. The Motillas are a distinctive type of Bronze Age site, found mainly in the La Mancha region. They are typically characterized by an artificial mound topped by a fortified enclosure, often surrounded by a ditch. Motilla del Azuer is one of the best-known examples, and its excavations have revealed a complex structure with multiple layers of occupation. The Motillas date to roughly 2200 to 1500 BCE, a period that overlaps with other Bronze Age cultures across the Iberian Peninsula. Mainstream archaeology interprets the Motillas as defensive settlements, possibly built in response to environmental stress and social instability. The Bronze Age in this region was a time of significant change, including shifts in climate and water availability. The Motillas, with their fortified enclosures and strategic positioning, may have served as refuges or centers of control. Their construction required substantial labor and organization, suggesting a society capable of mobilizing resources and coordinating large projects. Yet, the most striking feature of Motilla del Azuer is not its walls, but what lies beneath them. Excavations have revealed an underground well within the Motilla, a deep, stone-lined shaft that reaches down to the water table. This discovery transformed the way researchers understood the site. Rather than being merely defensive, Motilla del Azuer appears to have been a water management center, designed to access and protect a vital resource in a region where water could be scarce. The well is not a simple hole in the ground. It is a carefully constructed feature, with stone lining and protective measures that suggest long-term planning. This water-focused interpretation is compelling. The Motillas are often found in areas where water would have been a strategic concern. The ability to access and control water would have given a community significant advantage, particularly during dry seasons or periods of drought. Motilla del Azuer, with its well and fortified structure, may have served as a central point for water distribution, storage, and protection. But the presence of the well raises further questions. If the Motilla was built primarily to access water, why the elaborate fortifications? Was the water so valuable that it needed to be defended against rival groups? Or was the Motilla part of a broader system of control, an early form of centralized management over a landscape where survival depended on access to water? The Motillas also contain evidence of domestic and economic activity. Remains of storage areas, food processing, and daily life suggest that these were not temporary refuges, but functioning settlements. The combination of domestic space with fortified water access implies a society that was both practical and strategic. Yet, the exact social organization behind this system remains uncertain. Who controlled the Motillas? Were they managed by a centralized authority, or by local communities acting collectively? More speculative theories have emerged around the Motillas, partly because their form is so unusual. Some researchers have proposed that the Motillas were part of a broader network of surveillance and control, possibly connected to the management of resources across the plain. Others have suggested that the Motillas could have served as ritual centers, with water playing a symbolic as well as practical role. Water has long held spiritual significance in many cultures, and the act of accessing it through deep constructed wells could have been imbued with meaning. There are also more controversial ideas that touch on the question of ancient engineering. The depth and construction of the well at Motilla del Azuer imply a sophisticated understanding of geology and hydraulics. Some have suggested that this knowledge could indicate contact with other advanced cultures, or the transmission of specialized techniques across regions. The evidence is not definitive, but the possibility remains intriguing. The Motilla's abandonment around 1500 BCE is another aspect of the mystery. Like many Bronze Age sites, they appear to have been used for several centuries and then left behind. Was this due to environmental change? Perhaps a shift in climate that made water access less predictable? Or did social structures change, making centralized water control less necessary? The reasons are not fully understood, and the silence of the record leaves room for interpretation. Walking around Motilla del Azuer today, the mound rises quietly from the plain, its shape a reminder of deliberate human intervention. The stones, the well, the terraces, all speak of a society that understood the value of water and the need to protect it. Yet the site also speaks of something more elusive, the way a community can organize itself around a resource, creating structures that are both practical and symbolic. In the stillness of the La Mancha plain, the question remains, what did Motilla del Azuer represent to those who built it? Was it primarily a water management center, a defensive refuge, a symbol of centralized control, or something that combined all of these? And what other secrets might still lie beneath the mound, waiting to reveal the full story of a civilization that shaped the landscape in ways we are only beginning to understand? From the open plains of La Mancha, where Motilla del Azuer rises as a deliberate mark on the landscape, an ancient structure built around water, survival, and control, our journey turns once again toward the Atlantic coast. The terrain shifts, the air cools, and the green hills of northwestern Spain begin to reappear. The transition is not just geographical, it is also a shift in the type of mystery we encounter, from engineered water systems to fortified hilltop communities, from centralized resource control to societies shaped by terrain, defense, and identity. Castro de Elviña sits near the city of A Coruña in the region of Galicia, Spain. The site crowns a gentle hill overlooking the coast, with the sea visible in the distance and the surrounding landscape covered in lush vegetation. The air here is damp, the soil rich, and the light often softened by mist. The ruins of the Castro emerge from the grass and underbrush, stone walls forming circular enclosures, terraces cut into the hillside, and the foundations of round houses that once sheltered families and communities. At first glance, Elviña shares the familiar features of castros across northwestern Iberia: circular dwellings, defensive walls, and elevated positions chosen for visibility. Yet the site also has its own distinct character. The walls are substantial, built with local stone and designed to endure. The settlement's layout suggests careful planning, with structures arranged in a way that implies social organization. The terraces show a deliberate adaptation to the slope, maximizing usable space while maintaining defensive advantage. Mainstream archaeology places Castro de Elviña within the broader Castro culture of Galicia, typically dated to the Iron Age and extending into the Roman period. These castros are generally associated with pre-Roman peoples, such as the Talayotic, who inhabited the region before Roman conquest. Castros served as fortified settlements, providing protection and a sense of community in a landscape marked by rugged terrain and frequent conflict. They were often centers of local power, with social life organized around family groups and tribal structures. The structure of Elviña, like many castros, reflects a society adapted to both the environment and the social realities of the time. The walls provide defense, but they also define a shared space. The roundhouses, built close together, suggest a community that valued proximity and cooperation. The terraces show a practical understanding of the land, transforming the hillside into a usable living space. Yet even within this conventional framework, Elviña presents puzzles. The site's size and the thickness of its walls suggest a community that invested significant resources into construction. What kind of social organization could mobilize this labor? Was Elviña a simple village, or did it serve as a regional center, a place of gathering, trade, or ritual? The evidence is not definitive, and the interpretation remains open. One of the most intriguing aspects of Elviña is its location near the coast. The sea is visible from the hill, and the surrounding landscape suggests access to maritime routes. Could the Castro have been part of a broader network of coastal settlements connected by trade, communication, or shared identity? The Atlantic coast of Galicia is dotted with Castros, suggesting a regional pattern of settlement. But the exact nature of the relationships between these sites is not fully understood. The presence of Roman influence adds another layer of complexity. Like many Castros, Elviña shows evidence of interaction with the Roman world. Some Castros were abandoned during Roman expansion, while others continued to be inhabited, sometimes adapting to new realities. Did Elviña resist Roman control, or did its inhabitants integrate aspects of Roman life while maintaining their own traditions? The archaeological record offers hints, but the full story remains elusive. More speculative theories also emerge around Castros like Elviña. Some researchers suggest that these settlements were not only defensive, but also ritual centers, with the circular layout representing cosmological beliefs. The roundhouses could symbolize the world as understood by the community, with the walls marking the boundary between the familiar and the unknown. Such ideas are difficult to prove, yet they persist because the architecture seems to invite interpretation beyond mere practicality. Others have pointed to the possibility of Castros functioning as nodes in a broader communication network. Elevated positions, visibility, and strategic placement could have allowed communities to signal one another across distances. Could Elviña have been part of a system of watch points, coordinating defense or trade along the coast? The idea is plausible, but the evidence is incomplete. There is also the question of why some Castros were abandoned while others persisted. Was it due to conflict, environmental change, economic shifts, or social transformation? The coastal environment of Galicia is dynamic, with changing shorelines and weather patterns that could have affected settlement viability. Yet the human story remains hidden beneath the stones. The ruins do not tell us why the people left, only that they did. Walking through Castro de Elviña today, the walls rise gently from the grass, and the circular foundations echo the shape of the hill itself. The settlement seems both integrated into the landscape and deliberately set apart from it. It is a place built for community, for defense, and perhaps for identity. Yet it is also a place where the full story has been lost to time. In the quiet of the Galician mist, the question remains: what did Castro de Elviña represent to those who built it? Was it primarily a fortified village, a regional center, a symbol of identity, or something that combined all of these? And what other secrets might still lie beneath the soil, waiting to reveal the missing pieces of a story that remains only partially told? From the coastal hill of Elviña, where the stone walls of a Castro stand as a quiet testament to community, defense, and identity, our journey shifts once more across the waters of the western Mediterranean. We move from the misty Atlantic coast of Galicia to the sunlit island of Menorca, where the landscape is softer, the air warmer, and the light more direct. Yet, the ancient structures here hold a different kind of weight. They do not rise in defense of territory, but in service of something more intimate and perhaps more profound. The Naveta des Tudons sits on a low hill in the northwest of Menorca, its silhouette visible from a distance as a dark stone monument against the sky. The structure is made of large limestone blocks, fitted together without mortar, forming a shape that is both simple and startling. From above, it resembles an inverted ship or a stone coffin turned upright. The Naveta's walls curve inward toward a narrow entrance, creating a sense of containment and focus. The building is not tall, but its mass and precision give it a powerful presence. Navetas are unique to Menorca, and the Naveta de Tudons is the most famous and best preserved example. These structures date to the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age, roughly between 1000 and 600 BCE. They are generally interpreted as collective burial monuments used by the Talayotic culture that inhabited the Balearic Islands. The name Naveta comes from the Catalan word for little ship, reflecting the building's distinctive shape. Mainstream archaeology views the Naveta de Tudons as a funerary monument, a place where the dead were placed in a communal space, often along with offerings. Excavations have revealed human remains, pottery, and other artifacts, supporting the interpretation of the Naveta as a burial site. The structure's design, its narrow entrance, thick walls, and enclosed chamber, reinforces this understanding. It was built to protect what was inside, to contain it, and perhaps to mark it as sacred. Yet the Naveta's shape and scale raise questions that extend beyond funerary practice. Why was the structure designed to resemble an inverted ship? Was the form purely functional, or did it carry symbolic meaning? The sea is ever present on Menorca, and maritime culture would have been central to island life. Could the Naveta's shape be a deliberate reference to travel, perhaps the journey of the soul, or the passage from life to death? The Naveta's construction also suggests a society capable of significant organization. The stones are large and carefully placed, requiring skilled labor and planning. The building is not simply a burial chamber. It is a monument, a statement. Who decided to build it, and why was such effort invested in a structure meant to contain the dead? The answer may lie in the social and spiritual values of the Talayotic culture, but those values remain largely hidden. The Naveta's interior is narrow and elongated, with a low ceiling that forces the visitor to move carefully, almost reverently. The space feels constrained, as if the building itself is a kind of embrace. The human remains found inside were often disarticulated, suggesting that the bones were placed over time, perhaps in multiple phases. This raises questions about the rituals involved. Were the dead brought here periodically in a controlled ceremony? Was the Naveta used by a specific group or community? Or was it a shared burial site for a larger population? More speculative theories arise around the idea of the Naveta as a symbol of transition. If the structure is indeed shaped like a ship, could it represent the passage to another world? Many ancient cultures used maritime imagery to describe death as a journey. The Naveta's form might reflect a belief in a voyage beyond the living realm, but without written records, this remains a hypothesis, one that fits the shape but not the certainty. Other theories focus on the Naveta's placement within the landscape. The structure is situated on a hill with clear visibility, suggesting that it was meant to be seen. Could it have served as a territorial marker, a monument to ancestral lineage, or a sign of communal identity? The presence of other Talayotic structures in the area, including talayots and settlements, indicates a complex landscape of ritual and daily life. The Naveta may have been part of a broader network of sites that defined social boundaries and spiritual meaning. The Naveta des Tudons also raises questions about the relationship between the living and the dead in Talayotic society. The communal burial suggests a different approach to death than the individual tombs found in other cultures. Was the Naveta a way to emphasize collective identity, perhaps reflecting a society organized around extended kinship or shared lineage? Or was it a way to control and centralize the handling of the dead, reinforcing social order and authority? The end of the Talayotic culture and the abandonment of structures like the Naveta remain partly mysterious. By the time of Roman influence, many of these monuments were no longer in use, and the reasons for their decline are unclear. Was it due to cultural transformation, conquest, or a shift in spiritual beliefs? The silence of the record leaves room for speculation, but also for the recognition that the full story may never be known. Walking around the Naveta des Tudons today, the structure stands with a quiet, solemn presence. Its stone walls are weathered, but its form remains clear, and its shape continues to provoke questions. The building feels both grounded in the earth and reaching toward the sky, as if bridging two worlds. It is a monument to death, but also to the people who built it, people who invested time, labor, and intention into a structure that would outlast them. In the quiet of the Menorcan landscape, the question remains: what did the Naveta des Tudons mean to those who built it, and what did they believe it could do for the dead? Was it simply a burial chamber, or was it a symbol of a deeper journey, one that moved beyond the physical world? The stones do not answer, but they continue to hold the shape of a mystery that endures. From the quiet ship-like silhouette of the Naveta des Tudons, where stone was shaped into a vessel for the dead, our journey moves northward once more, back toward the Atlantic and into a landscape where ancient monuments rise from the earth like quiet, deliberate statements. The island world of Menorca fades behind us, and we return to the continental edge of Western Europe, where the sea is wide, the wind persistent, and the past is carved into rock in ways that still defy full explanation. In the Gulf of Morbihan, off the coast of Brittany in northwestern France, a small island holds one of the most remarkable passage tombs in Europe. Gavrinis is unassuming from the outside, a low mound of earth covered in grass, set amid a quiet, sheltered inlet. But step closer, and the site's true significance becomes clear. Beneath that modest mound lies a passage tomb whose stone walls are carved with a density of decoration unmatched in many other Neolithic monuments. The entrance is narrow, a simple opening in the mound that leads into darkness. The passage itself is low and tight, forcing a visitor to move slowly, carefully, as if the tomb itself requires respect. The air is cool, the stone smooth underhand, and the sense of containment is immediate. At the end of the passage lies the chamber, a space that is both intimate and awe-inspiring, lined with slabs carved in swirling geometric patterns. Spirals, chevrons, concentric circles, symbols repeated and layered in a way that suggests not decoration for its own sake, but a deliberate language, a message set in stone. Mainstream archaeology dates Gavrinis to around 3,500 BCE, placing it within the broader tradition of megalithic construction that spread across Atlantic Europe. Passage tombs are generally interpreted as funerary monuments, places where the dead were laid to rest and where the living could return, perhaps for ritual, remembrance, or ancestor veneration. The structure of Gavrinis fits this model. A covered burial chamber reached through a passage built to endure. But Gavrinis is not merely a tomb. It is a monument of extraordinary complexity. The carvings are not random. They follow patterns and rhythms, suggesting a symbolic system. The stones themselves were chosen and positioned with care, each slab fitting into a larger design. The passage and chamber are aligned in a way that implies intention beyond simple construction. The mound, too, is shaped as a deliberate marker on the landscape, visible from the surrounding water and land. The carvings raise immediate questions. What do these symbols mean? Were they intended to communicate with the dead, to guide them, to protect them? Or were they meant for the living, a visual language of community identity and belief? Without written records, interpretation must rely on comparison and inference. But the density of the imagery at Gavrinis suggests a culture that placed profound importance on symbolic expression. Some researchers propose that the carvings are related to cosmology, representations of the sun, the moon, stars, or cycles of nature. Others suggest they may relate to initiation, rites of passage, or a mapping of sacred landscapes. The repetition of spirals, in particular, has been linked to concepts of eternity, cycles, or spiritual journey, but the true meaning remains elusive. The symbols are familiar in form, yet their exact message is hidden in the silence of prehistory. The location of Gavrinis also invites speculation. The tomb sits on an island, accessible only by water. Was the island chosen for its isolation, its separation from daily life? Or was it selected for its visibility, a monument meant to be seen from the sea and the surrounding coast? The act of crossing water to reach the tomb may itself have been significant, perhaps symbolizing a transition between worlds, between life and death, between the mundane and the sacred. The broader landscape of Brittany is dense with megalithic sites, alignments, dolmens, menhirs, and burial mounds scattered across the region. Gavrinis sits within this context, yet it stands out for its carved stones. The density and quality of the decoration suggest a specialized craft, a community that invested considerable time and skill into the monument. Who were the people who built it? What did they believe? And how did they transmit the knowledge required to carve such complex patterns? More speculative theories arise when we consider the possible meanings of the carvings as a form of encoded knowledge. Some have suggested that the motifs could represent maps, calendars, or systems of cosmological order. Others propose that the carvings may encode information about migration, lineage, or territorial claims. The idea is tempting, a monument not only for the dead, but for the living, preserving knowledge across generations in stone. Yet the most compelling mystery may not be the meaning of the carvings alone, but the very existence of such a sophisticated monument in a time we often assume was simple. Gavrinis challenges that assumption. It suggests a society capable of planning, organization, and artistic expression on a scale that still feels remarkable. The tomb is not merely functional. It is expressive, intentional, and deeply symbolic. There is also the question of the tomb's use. Passage tombs were not always sealed and forgotten after a single burial. Many show signs of repeated access, ritual visits, additional interments, or ongoing ceremonies. Was Gavrinis used over centuries, a place of communal memory? If so, how did the meaning of the carvings evolve over time? Did the symbols remain constant, or did they take on new significance as the generations passed? The island itself, quiet and unassuming, seems to guard its secrets. The tomb's entrance remains a threshold between worlds, an invitation to enter, but only with the awareness that one is stepping into a space shaped by beliefs we cannot fully reconstruct. The stones do not explain themselves. They offer only their patterns, their weight, their endurance. As the light shifts across the chamber and the carvings, the question remains: what was Gavrinis meant to be in the minds of those who built it? A tomb, certainly, but also a message, a map, a sacred space, or perhaps something that combined all of these. The monument stands as a reminder that ancient structures can be both known and unknowable, revealing their craftsmanship while keeping their meaning hidden. And so, as we leave the island and return to the mainland, the mystery of Gavrinis lingers. What other symbols remain unread in the stones of Europe's megaliths? What stories were carved into the rock that we have not yet learned to interpret? The tomb endures, silent and powerful, inviting us to wonder what lies beneath its carvings, and what else may still be hidden in the quiet places where ancient people chose to build. From the carved stones of Gavrinis, where the walls speak in spirals and the passage leads into a quiet darkness, our journey turns again toward the Mediterranean, this time to an island whose prehistoric landscape is marked by some of Europe's most enigmatic stone monuments. Sardinia is a place where the past remains visible in the terrain. in nuraghi that rise like towers from the hills, in sacred wells hidden in valleys, and in megalithic complexes that seem to resist easy explanation. It is here, amid the island's rugged interior, that we find Monte Baranta. Monte Baranta is not a single monument, but a complex, an arrangement of stones and structures set upon a hill that looks out over the surrounding countryside. From a distance, the site appears as a scatter of boulders and low walls, as if the landscape itself has been subtly rearranged. The stones are weathered, their surfaces softened by time, yet their placement suggests intention. The hill is quiet, isolated, and still, the kind of place where the wind seems to carry echoes of earlier ages. The Monte Baranta complex is part of Sardinia's broader megalithic tradition, which includes the famous nuraghi, tower-like structures built with massive stone blocks. Unlike the nuraghi, however, Monte Baranta is often described as a megalithic complex, meaning it includes various types of structures and arrangements that do not fit neatly into one category. This complexity is part of what makes the site compelling. It does not conform to a single, easily understood purpose. Archaeologists have identified Monte Baranta as a site with multiple phases of use, possibly spanning several centuries. The stones are arranged in patterns that suggest both practical and ritual functions. Some formations resemble enclosures or terraces, while others appear to mark specific points in the landscape. There is evidence of human activity, but the full nature of that activity is not easily determined. The site is not a straightforward settlement, nor is it a simple ceremonial space. It occupies a liminal space between the known and the unknown. Mainstream interpretations of Monte Baranta often focus on its possible role as a sacred landscape, an area where rituals were performed, where the community gathered, and where the living connected with the world of the ancestors. Sardinia's megalithic sites are frequently associated with the worship of water, fertility, and celestial cycles. In this context, Monte Baranta could have served as a kind of open-air sanctuary, a place where the natural environment and human construction were woven together. The hill's location is significant. From Monte Baranta, the surrounding terrain is visible in broad sweeps, and the horizon is framed by distant ridges. Such visibility could have been practical, an advantage for watching over the land, but it also has symbolic implications. The ability to see far across the landscape suggests a connection between the site and territorial awareness, perhaps indicating a role in marking boundaries or asserting control. Yet, the stone arrangements themselves suggest more than mere utility. They imply a relationship with the environment that goes beyond the everyday. One of the most striking aspects of Monte Baranta is the way the stones are placed in relation to each other. The formations create a sense of movement, as if the builders were guiding the eye along a deliberate path. Some researchers suggest that the site may have been aligned with celestial events, sunrise, sunset, solstices, or lunar cycles. Such alignments are not uncommon in megalithic architecture, and Sardinia's prehistoric people were likely observant of the sky. But the evidence at Monte Baranta is not definitive, leaving room for interpretation and debate. The question of alignment raises deeper mysteries. If the site was oriented toward the heavens, what did that mean to its builders? Were they tracking time, seasons, or agricultural cycles? Or were they mapping a spiritual journey, using the sky as a canvas for belief? The stones may have been a way to anchor intangible concepts, time, fate, destiny, into the physical world. Yet, without written records, the meaning remains speculative, and the monument continues to resist a single explanation. Another aspect that intrigues researchers is the apparent combination of different architectural forms. Monte Baranta does not fit neatly into the category of nuraghi, nor does it resemble the more clearly defined sacred wells or tombs found elsewhere on the island. it seems to incorporate elements of multiple traditions, suggesting a site that evolved over time or served multiple purposes. Could Monte Baranta have been a place of transition, where different cultural practices intersected? If so, the complex might represent a meeting point of ideas, an architectural record of change. More speculative theories suggest that Monte Baranta may have been a site of initiation, or a place where certain members of the community underwent rites of passage. The arrangement of stones could have created a controlled environment for ceremonies, guiding participants through a sequence of spaces. The hill's isolation would have provided privacy, while its visibility ensured that the site remained connected to the broader landscape. Such interpretations are difficult to prove, but they offer a way to consider the human experience of the site, not just its physical structure. There are also fringe ideas that connect Monte Baranta to broader, less conventional narratives. Some propose that the site is part of an ancient network of sacred places, aligned across the landscape in a way that suggests an underlying geometric or energetic plan. Others suggest that the megalithic stones contain encoded knowledge, perhaps related to astronomy, mathematics, or spiritual systems. These theories are not supported by mainstream archaeology, yet they persist because the site's complexity invites them. The stones, after all, are silent. They offer no explanation, only their presence. The very silence of Monte Baranta is part of its power. The stones do not reveal their purpose easily, and the landscape does not offer clear answers. Instead, the site demands patience and attention. It asks us to consider not only what we can see, but what we cannot. What was the relationship between the builders and the hill itself? Did they see the landscape as a living entity? And did the stones serve as a way to communicate with it? Did they believe that the earth held memory, and that by placing stones in specific patterns, they could shape the future? The complexity of Monte Baranta also invites reflection on the nature of prehistoric societies. The site suggests a community capable of planning and labor, of shared beliefs and coordinated effort. It challenges assumptions about the simplicity of ancient life, revealing instead a world in which people invested deeply in structures that outlasted them. The stones are not only a record of physical construction, but of intention, of what mattered enough to be built to endure. As we stand on the hill, looking out over Sardinia's rolling landscape, the question remains: what did Monte Baranta mean to those who built it? And what did they hope to achieve through its construction? Was it a sanctuary, a marker, an observatory, a ritual path, or something that combined all these roles? The site offers evidence, but not certainty. It remains a puzzle shaped from stone, inviting us to look closer, to listen more carefully, and to accept that some mysteries are not solved by answers alone. And so the stones of Monte Baranta remain, quiet and resolute, a megalithic complex that continues to challenge our understanding of the past. What other secrets might be hidden within its arrangements? What meanings have been lost to time? And what traces of ancient knowledge still wait beneath the surface, waiting for someone to notice? From the stone formations of Monte Baranta, where the hill itself seems to have been shaped by human intention, our path moves away from the Mediterranean's open landscapes and toward a harsher, more austere terrain. The island's megaliths have given us a sense of ritual and mystery, of monuments built in places that demand attention. Now we travel east, across seas, mountains, and deserts, to a region where ancient structures are not only built, but hidden. The caves of Qumran, perched above the Dead Sea, are not a monument in the usual sense. They are a system of shelter and secrecy, an architecture of refuge and concealment that has intrigued scholars for decades. The cliffs of the Judean desert rise sharply from the shoreline, their limestone faces bleached by sun and wind. From a distance, the terrain looks barren, almost inhospitable. But close up, the cliffs reveal a network of caves, natural cavities that have been adapted and modified by human hands. Some are simple hollows, others show evidence of stone constructions, walls, shelves, and small enclosures built into the rock. The caves are silent, yet they carry the weight of a history that has been preserved in fragments, in ash, in ink, and in stone. The site of Qumran itself is a settlement located on a plateau above the caves. The ruins include stone buildings, cisterns, and a layout that suggests communal life. The mainstream view connects Qumran with the Essenes, a Jewish sect described in ancient sources as a group that lived communally, practiced ritual purity, and withdrew from mainstream society. According to this interpretation, the caves served as storage for the texts that would later become known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden away in clay jars preserved in the dry desert air. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the mid-20th century, are among the most significant archaeological finds of the modern era. They include biblical manuscripts, sectarian writings, and texts that provide insight into the religious and cultural world of Second Temple Judaism. The scrolls' preservation in the caves is often attributed to the arid climate and the protective environment of the rock. The story is compelling. A community living in isolation, preserving sacred writings, and hiding them away in a time of upheaval. Yet, even within this framework, mysteries remain. The caves are not a single, simple storage space. They are multiple, scattered across the cliffs, each with its own configuration. Some contain evidence of human modification, while others appear more natural. Why were certain caves chosen over others? What criteria determined their use? And why were the scrolls hidden in such a way that their discovery would be delayed for centuries? The stone constructions within the caves add another layer of intrigue. In some locations, walls and partitions suggest that the caves were adapted for more than storage. Shelves may have been used for scrolls, but could they also have served other purposes? Habitation, ritual, or even production? The presence of small enclosures and built structures suggests that the caves were part of an active human environment, not merely a passive repository. The settlement at Qumran itself raises questions about the relationship between the living community and the hidden texts. The ruins include areas that resemble communal spaces, dining rooms, and ritual baths. The architecture implies a society organized around shared practices and strict rules, but the exact nature of the community remains debated. Was Qumran a monastic-like settlement, a fortress, a villa, or something else entirely? The evidence can be read in multiple ways, and the absence of explicit records leaves room for interpretation. Some scholars have argued that the site may have been more diverse in its function than the traditional Essene model suggests. The presence of certain artifacts and the layout of buildings have led to alternative theories, including the possibility that Qumran was a military outpost or a retreat used by different groups over time. The scrolls themselves, while often associated with the Essenes, may have been collected from various sources. If so, the caves could represent a more complex network of storage and preservation, perhaps serving multiple communities. The question of why the scrolls were hidden in the first place is central to the mystery. The period in which the texts were written and stored was one of political turmoil. The region experienced Roman occupation, internal conflict, and shifting religious authority. It is plausible that a community would hide sacred texts to protect them from destruction or confiscation. But the care with which the scrolls were stored, wrapped, placed in jars, and hidden deep within the cliffs, suggests a deliberate and long-term plan. Who made that plan? And what did they believe would happen if the texts were found? Beyond the scrolls, the caves of Qumran invite broader questions about human behavior in extreme environments. The desert is a place where survival requires adaptation, and the use of caves reflects a deep understanding of the landscape. The stone constructions show that the people who lived here were not simply enduring the environment, They were shaping it. They built walls, carved niches, and created spaces that could support communal life. What motivated them to commit such effort in a place so remote? More speculative theories extend beyond the established narrative, exploring the possibility that the caves held other, less documented contents. Some have suggested that the scrolls represent only a portion of what was hidden, and that additional texts or artifacts may remain undiscovered. Others propose that the caves were used for secret rituals or esoteric practices, preserved from mainstream society. These ideas are difficult to substantiate, but they persist because the site's silence is so profound. The stones offer evidence, but not a complete story. The caves also raise questions about the nature of secrecy itself. The act of hiding texts implies a belief in their power. It suggests that the writings were considered dangerous or sacred, worthy of protection at great cost. What did the scrolls mean to the people who hid them? Were they seen as a message to the future, a record of truth that must survive? Or were they a private collection, intended only for a select group? The desert landscape around Qumran is still harsh, but the site is no longer isolated. Modern visitors can walk the plateau and look down into the cliffs, imagining the paths taken by those who lived and worked here. Yet the caves remain a threshold between eras, a place where time has been preserved in the most literal sense. The stones and the scrolls are a reminder that the past can be hidden not only in ruins, but in the earth itself. As we stand on the edge of the cliffs, looking at the network of caves carved into the rock, the mystery remains. What else lies within these hollows? What texts? What artifacts? What traces of lives that once existed in this harsh landscape? The caves of Qumran are a monument not only to what was preserved, but to what may still be undiscovered. And the question lingers: how many secrets remain hidden in the stone, waiting for the right moment to be revealed? From the hidden caves of Qumran, where stone and silence preserved sacred texts for millennia, our journey returns once again to the Mediterranean, this time to an island landscape shaped by towers rather than caves. Menorca's Talayots rise from the earth like sentinels, their circular forms punctuating the horizon with a quiet, deliberate presence. The shift in terrain is striking, from the steep cliffs of the Judean desert to the gentle hills and open fields of the Balearic Islands, yet the sense of ancient purpose remains the same. These are not merely ruins. They are structures that demand attention, and they invite us to consider what a society chose to build and why. Talayots are among the most distinctive features of Menorca's prehistoric landscape. These stone towers, often circular, sometimes rectangular, stand in various states of preservation across the island. Some rise nearly intact, their walls still impressive in height. Others are reduced to low mounds of rubble, their original form discernible only through careful study. Yet even in their ruined state, the Talayots retain a powerful presence. They are not random piles of stone. They are deliberate constructions, each one a statement of human intention. The word Talayot comes from the Catalan Talayot, meaning watchtower, and the traditional interpretation has often emphasized their defensive or lookout functions. In many cases, their placement supports this idea. Talayots are frequently located on elevated ground, with broad views of the surrounding landscape. They could have served as vantage points, allowing inhabitants to monitor movement across the island, to watch for approaching ships, or to signal between communities. But the story may be more complex than a simple system of surveillance. The Talayotic culture on Menorca dates roughly from the late Bronze Age into the early Iron Age, around 1000 to 600 BCE. This period is marked by the construction of not only talayots, but also navetas, talas, and other megalithic structures. The island's prehistoric architecture suggests a society with both the organizational capacity and the motivation to build on a large scale. The talayots, in particular, require considerable labor and skill. The stones are massive, and the walls are often built with careful fitting, sometimes without mortar. The construction itself implies planning, coordination, and shared purpose. Mainstream archaeology generally views Talayots as part of a broader settlement pattern. They are often associated with villages or clusters of structures, suggesting that they were integrated into community life. Some Talayots appear to have internal chambers or spaces that could have been used for storage or shelter. Others show evidence of modifications over time, indicating that their function may have evolved. The towers may have been multi-purpose, part defensive, part communal, part symbolic. The variety of Talayots across Menorca is itself a source of intrigue. Some are simple, with a single central chamber. Others are more complex, with multiple internal spaces or surrounding enclosures. Why such diversity? Was it a matter of different functions, different time periods, or different communities? The answer is not clear, and the uncertainty is part of what makes the Talayots compelling. They are not a uniform tradition. They are a landscape of variation. One of the most persistent mysteries is the relationship between the Talayots and other Talayotic structures, such as the talas, stone monuments consisting of a vertical pillar topped by a horizontal stone, forming a T-shape. The talas are often found in enclosures near Talayots, and their function is still debated. Some scholars propose that they served a ritual purpose, possibly related to ancestor worship or celestial observation. The proximity of Talayots and talas suggests that the towers may have had more than a defensive role. They may have been part of a sacred landscape where the daily and the spiritual were intertwined. The idea of a sacred landscape is supported by the way Talayots are integrated into the environment. They are not hidden. They are placed in locations that make them visible, sometimes aligned with natural features or other monuments. The Talayots could have acted as markers, points of reference in a world without written maps. They may have defined territory, signaled identity, or marked paths of movement across the island. Yet the tower's meaning is not fully captured by practical explanations alone. Their sheer presence suggests a deeper significance. From the stone towers of Menorca, where Talayots rise like silent sentinels over fields and horizons, our journey turns again, this time northward, back to the rugged terrain of the Armenian highlands. The Mediterranean's soft light gives way to a harsher climate, where the air is thinner and the landscape is shaped by ancient volcanic activity. Yet the sense of mystery remains the same, a place where stones have been arranged with purpose, where the human hand has left an imprint that continues to provoke questions. In this highland region, we find Zorats Karer. Zorats Karer is a field of standing stones near the village of Karahunj, often referred to as the Armenian Stonehenge. The name itself, Zorats Karer, means stone army, and the site's appearance certainly evokes the image of an assembled force. Rows of upright stones stretching across the landscape, some standing alone, others clustered in lines or circles. The stones vary in height and shape, many with a distinct pointed top, as if they have been deliberately shaped to stand upright. The field is set on a plateau, with the mountains rising in the distance and the sky wide above, creating a sense of openness that contrasts with the dense arrangement of stones below. The first impression of Zorats Karer is one of scale. The site is not a single monument, but a vast arrangement that seems to spread across the earth like a deliberate pattern. Walking among the stones, it is easy to feel both small and observed, an impression intensified by the way the stones are positioned. They are not scattered randomly. They appear to follow lines, alignments, and perhaps even a hidden logic. Mainstream archaeology generally dates Zorats Karer to the Bronze Age, around the 2nd millennium BCE, though the exact chronology remains debated. Some researchers suggest that the site could have been a necropolis, a burial ground where stones marked the graves of the dead. Others propose that it was a ceremonial site, perhaps used for rituals related to death, fertility, or seasonal cycles. The presence of burial mounds in the area supports the idea that the landscape was used for funerary purposes. The stones themselves are intriguing. Many have small holes drilled into them, and some appear to have been shaped or carved. The effort required to shape and erect these stones implies a society with both the resources and the social organization to undertake such work. The question is not simply why the stones were erected, but what the arrangement was meant to communicate. One of the most discussed aspects of Zorats Karer is the possibility of astronomical alignment. Some researchers argue that certain stones line up with celestial bodies or events, such as the solstices or the rising of particular stars. The idea of an ancient observatory is compelling, especially given the site's elevation and wide views of the sky. If the stones were used to track the movements of the heavens, what knowledge did the builders possess, and how did they use it? However, the astronomical interpretation is not universally accepted. Critics argue that the alignments are not precise enough to support the claim of a deliberate observatory. The stones may align with the landscape for other reasons, or the apparent patterns may be the result of later rearrangement or natural shifts over time. Yet the possibility remains, and the debate itself underscores the site's enigmatic nature. Whether or not the stones were used for astronomy, the arrangement suggests a concern with orientation, an awareness of direction, season, and perhaps the cosmos. Another element that deepens the mystery is the site's name, Stone Army. This metaphor invites speculation about the stone's symbolic meaning. Were they meant to represent ancestors, guardians, or a form of protective presence? In many cultures, standing stones are associated with memory and commemoration, serving as markers for the dead or as reminders of significant events. Could the stones of Zorats Karer be a way of making the landscape itself a memorial? The presence of holes in some stones has led to further speculation. Some propose that these holes could have been used to insert wooden poles or to attach ropes, suggesting that the stones may have been part of larger structures or used in ceremonies involving movement or sound. Others have suggested that the holes could be connected to astronomical observation, perhaps used to cite particular stars or solar events. The holes add an element of functional mystery. They imply a purpose that is not immediately visible. From the stone towers of Menorca, where Talayots rise like silent sentinels over fields and horizons, our journey turns again, this time northward, back to the rugged terrain of the Armenian highlands. The Mediterranean soft light gives way to a harsher climate, where the air is thinner and the landscape is shaped by ancient volcanic activity. Yet the sense of mystery remains the same, a place where stones have been arranged with purpose, where the human hand has left an imprint that continues to provoke questions. In this highland region, we find Zorats Karer. Zorats Karer is a field of standing stones near the village of Karahunj, often referred to as the Armenian Stonehenge. The name itself, Zorats Karer, means stone army, and the site's appearance certainly evokes the image of an assembled force. Rows of upright stones stretching across the landscape, some standing alone, others clustered in lines or circles. The stones vary in height and shape, many with a distinct pointed top, as if they have been deliberately shaped to stand upright. The field is set on a plateau, with the mountains rising in the distance and the sky wide above, creating a sense of openness that contrasts with the dense arrangement of stones below. The first impression of Zorats Karer is one of scale. The site is not a single monument, but a vast arrangement that seems to spread across the earth like a deliberate pattern. Walking among the stones, it is easy to feel both small and observed, an impression intensified by the way the stones are positioned. They are not scattered randomly. They appear to follow lines, alignments, and perhaps even a hidden logic. Mainstream archaeology generally dates Zorats Karer to the Bronze Age, around the 2nd millennium BCE, though the exact chronology remains debated. Some researchers suggest that the site could have been a necropolis, a burial ground where stones marked the graves of the dead. Others propose that it was a ceremonial site, perhaps used for rituals related to death, fertility, or seasonal cycles. The presence of burial mounds in the area supports the idea that the landscape was used for funerary purposes. The stones themselves are intriguing. Many have small holes drilled into them, and some appear to have been shaped or carved. The effort required to shape and erect these stones implies a society with both the resources and the social organization to undertake such work. The question is not simply why the stones were erected, but what the arrangement was meant to communicate. One of the most discussed aspects of Zorats Karer is the possibility of astronomical alignment. Some researchers argue that certain stones line up with celestial bodies or events, such as the solstices or the rising of particular stars. The idea of an ancient observatory is compelling, especially given the site's elevation and wide views of the sky. If the stones were used to track the movements of the heavens, what knowledge did the builders possess, and how did they use it? However, the astronomical interpretation is not universally accepted. Critics argue that the alignments are not precise enough to support the claim of a deliberate observatory. The stones may align with the landscape for other reasons, or the apparent patterns may be the result of later rearrangement or natural shifts over time. Yet the possibility remains, and the debate itself underscores the site's enigmatic nature. Whether or not the stones were used for astronomy, the arrangement suggests a concern with orientation, an awareness of direction, season, and perhaps the cosmos. Another element that deepens the mystery is the site's name, Stone Army. This metaphor invites speculation about the stone's symbolic meaning. Were they meant to represent ancestors, guardians, or a form of protective presence? In many cultures, standing stones are associated with memory and commemoration, serving as markers for the dead or as reminders of significant events. Could the stones of Zorats Karer be a way of making the landscape itself a memorial? The presence of holes in some stones has led to further speculation. Some propose that these holes could have been used to insert wooden poles or to attach ropes, suggesting that the stones may have been part of larger structures or used in ceremonies involving movement or sound. Others have suggested that the holes could be connected to astronomical observation, perhaps used to cite particular stars or solar events. The holes add an element of functional mystery. They imply a purpose that is not immediately visible. Beyond the stones themselves, the landscape of the region contributes to the site's aura. Zorats Karer is situated in a place where the earth seems to hold memory. The plateau is open and windswept, and the stones appear to rise directly from the ground as if they were always meant to be there. The setting is both beautiful and austere, a place that invites contemplation and a sense of timelessness. The question of who built Zorats Karer is also part of the mystery. The site predates written records in the region, and the culture responsible for the stones remains partially hidden. The Bronze Age in the Armenian highlands was a time of developing social complexity, trade, and cultural exchange. The builders may have been part of a larger network of communities, sharing knowledge and practices. Yet the specific identity of the people who erected the stones is not known with certainty. More speculative theories take the mystery further. Some propose that Zorats Karer is part of an ancient system of sacred sites across the region, connected by lines or alignments that reflect a broader understanding of the landscape. Others suggest that the stones may have been used for sound or acoustic rituals, with the arrangement creating specific auditory effects. The idea of sound as a component of ancient ritual is difficult to prove, but the notion adds a layer of sensory imagination to the site. The stones, after all, are not only visual, they are physical objects that occupy space, and their arrangement may have been experienced in ways that we cannot fully reconstruct. There are also fringe ideas that connect Zorats Karer to ancient astronomy in a more dramatic way, proposing that the site is older than mainstream dating suggests, or that it contains encoded knowledge of celestial events. These theories often rely on patterns and interpretations that are not widely accepted in academic circles, yet they persist because the site is so open to multiple readings. The stones are a canvas for interpretation, and the absence of definitive evidence leaves room for the imagination. What remains clear is that Zorats Karer is more than a field of stones. It is a landscape shaped by human intention, a monument that demands attention not only for its physical presence, but for the questions it raises. The stones are not random, and their arrangement suggests a purpose that went beyond simple construction. Whether the site was a necropolis, a ceremonial ground, an observatory, or a combination of functions, the truth is that the stones continue to resist a single explanation. As we walk among the standing stones, the question that lingers is not just what the site was used for, but what it meant to the people who built it. Did they see the stones as guardians of the dead, markers of time, or symbols of a cosmological order? Did they believe the landscape itself was alive, and that by arranging stones they could shape the world? The stones remain silent, but they hold the shape of a mystery that continues to endure. And so Zorats Karer stands in the Armenian highlands, a stone army that has weathered millennia. What messages are hidden in its alignments? What knowledge was encoded in its arrangement? And what else might remain undiscovered in the land that gave rise to such an enduring, enigmatic monument? From the stone army of Zorats Karer, where standing stones stretch across the Armenian highlands like a deliberate pattern of memory, our journey returns once more to the Atlantic edge of Europe. We leave behind the open plateau and return to the megalithic heartland of Brittany, where the past is not only preserved in stone but shaped into massive earthworks that blend architecture and landscape. The transition is subtle, but the feeling is familiar. A place where human intention has been made permanent, where stones and earth have been arranged with care, and where the meaning remains partly hidden beneath layers of time. On the northern coast of Brittany, near the village of Plouazoc, sits the Barnenez Tumulus, one of the oldest and most imposing megalithic monuments in Europe. From a distance, the tumulus appears as a low, grassy hill, its gentle slope rising from the surrounding fields. It is not an immediate spectacle in the way a towering stone circle might be, but its scale is unmistakable. The mound stretches for over 70 meters in length and rises to a height of around 8 meters. It is a man-made hill, a deliberate reshaping of the landscape, built to contain chambers, passageways, and the memory of the dead. The exterior is deceptively simple. A visitor might walk past the tumulus without realizing its significance, seeing only a mound of earth and grass. But the structure is not merely a hill. It is a monumental cairn, built from stone and earth, containing a series of burial chambers that are accessed through narrow passages. The Barnenez Tumulus dates to the early Neolithic, around 4,800 to 4,300 BCE, making it older than many of the more famous megalithic sites. Its age alone places it among the earliest large-scale architectural projects in Europe. The most famous aspect of Barnenez is its multiple chambers. The tumulus contains several separate burial spaces, each constructed with large stone slabs and covered by the mound. Some chambers are relatively large, while others are smaller, more intimate. The layout suggests a deliberate plan, a sequence of spaces created for specific purposes. The chambers are not uniform. They vary in size and design, indicating that the construction may have taken place in phases or that different chambers served different functions. Mainstream archaeology interprets Barnenez as a collective burial monument, part of the broader tradition of passage tombs in the Atlantic Neolithic. The tumulus is often compared to other megalithic sites in Brittany and Ireland, where burial chambers are enclosed within mounds of earth. The construction of such a monument requires not only labor, but also a social structure capable of organizing and sustaining long-term projects. The builders of Barnenez were not merely hunters and gatherers. They were a community with shared beliefs and the ability to mobilize resources. Yet the tumulus is more than a burial site. The interior chambers are decorated with carved motifs, spirals, chevrons, and other geometric patterns. These carvings echo the motifs found in other megalithic sites, suggesting a shared symbolic language across regions. The decoration implies that the chambers were not simply functional spaces, but also symbolic ones, designed to convey meaning through form. The carvings are not random. They follow patterns that suggest intention, perhaps representing cosmological ideas, ancestral memory, or ritual practice. Within Barnenez, there is a section known as the lesser chambers, smaller burial spaces that are less prominent than the main chambers, but still integral to the structure. These lesser chambers invite particular intrigue because they are less studied and less understood, yet they are part of the same monumental project. Why were these smaller chambers included? Were they built for different individuals, different families, or different phases of use? Or did they serve a purpose beyond burial, perhaps as spaces for ritual, storage, or symbolic transition? The very existence of multiple chambers suggests a complex relationship with death and memory. The tumulus is not a single tomb, but a landscape of tombs within a single monument. This raises questions about the social organization of the community. Was the monument a shared burial space for a large group, or was it reserved for elites? The evidence of multiple chambers could suggest both possibilities. The tumulus could represent a communal effort to honor the dead, or it could reflect a hierarchical society with distinct burial practices. The construction techniques of Barnenez also provoke wonder. The stones are massive and the chambers were built with precision. The mound itself required the movement of large amounts of earth and rock, a task that would have taken considerable time and effort. How did the builders coordinate such a project without written records? What motivated them to invest so much labor into a monument that would not benefit the living directly? The answer likely lies in belief, an understanding that the dead remained present in the world of the living and that the monument served as a bridge between the two. The location of Barnenez is also significant. The tumulus is situated near the coast, with the sea visible in the distance. The coastal setting may have been symbolic, connecting the monument to the wider world beyond the land. The sea is a powerful boundary, a place of transition, and in many ancient cultures it is associated with the journey of the soul. Could the tumulus's location have been chosen to reflect a belief in a passage to another realm? The connection between land and sea may have been part of the monument's meaning. More speculative theories emerge when we consider the possibility that the lesser chambers served functions beyond burial. Some suggest that the smaller spaces could have been used for initiation rites, for storing ritual objects, or for housing offerings. The chambers could have been part of a larger ritual system, with the main chambers reserved for the dead and the lesser chambers used by the living for ceremonial purposes. The evidence is not conclusive, but the idea invites us to think beyond the straightforward burial interpretation. There are also fringe theories that propose more dramatic explanations. Some suggest that the tumulus may have been aligned with celestial events, functioning as an early calendar or observatory. Others propose that the carvings encode knowledge of astronomy or cosmology. While these ideas are not widely accepted, they persist because the monument is so ancient and so complex that it seems to demand a deeper meaning. The stones, after all, are silent. They offer no explanation, only their presence. The lesser chambers, in particular, highlight the gaps in our understanding. They are part of the monument, yet they are less visible and less understood. They invite questions about the social and ritual life of the community. Why were some chambers larger and more prominent, while others were smaller and more hidden? What does this say about the people who built the tumulus and the values they held? Walking inside Barnenez, the air is cool and the stone is close. The chambers are narrow and the light is dim, creating a sense of intimacy and containment. The carvings on the walls are worn but still visible, their patterns still suggesting a language that has been lost. The tumulus feels like a book written in stone, its pages sealed beneath the earth. The lesser chambers are like smaller chapters, perhaps containing details that we have not yet learned to read. As we stand within the tumulus, the question remains: what did Barnenez mean to those who built it, and what did the lesser chambers represent in the larger story of the monument? Was the tumulus a communal tomb, a ceremonial site, a symbol of territorial identity, or something else entirely? The evidence provides clues, but not certainty. The monument endures as a reminder that ancient structures can be both known and unknowable. And so Barnenez remains, a massive mound of earth and stone on the coast of Brittany, holding its chambers and its secrets beneath the grass. What other meanings lie hidden within its lesser chambers? What stories remain unread in its carvings? And what else might still be discovered if we continue to look carefully, listen closely, and remain open to the possibility that the past still has something to teach us? From the massive mound of Barnenez, where chambers and carvings lie sealed beneath earth and grass, our journey turns once more toward the Iberian Peninsula, back to a landscape where stone and earth are shaped not only for burial, but for defense, community, and power. The shift is stark, from the quiet mystery of Neolithic tombs to the imposing complexity of a Bronze Age fortified settlement. Yet the sense of human intention remains the same. Los Millares in southeastern Spain is a place where the past is built into the terrain in a way that continues to challenge our understanding of ancient societies. Los Millares sits on a low hill overlooking the river valley of the Andarax in the province of Almeria. The surrounding landscape is arid, with scrubland and rocky hills stretching into the distance. The site's position is strategic. It commands a view of the valley and the routes that run through it. Even today, the location feels deliberate, as if the builders chose the hill not merely for convenience, but for control. The settlement is not hidden. It is exposed, visible, and imposing, an architecture of presence. The first thing a visitor notices at Los Millares is the scale of the fortifications. The site is surrounded by multiple concentric walls, some of them reinforced with towers and bastions. The walls are made of stone, and their construction suggests significant planning and labor. They are not simple boundary markers. They are defensive structures designed to withstand attack. The complexity of the fortifications implies a society that felt the need to protect itself and that had the resources to build on a large scale. Los Millares dates to the Copper Age, roughly between 3200 and 2200 BCE. This places it among the earliest large fortified settlements in Europe, a time when metalworking was emerging and social complexity was increasing. The site includes not only defensive walls, but also internal structures, houses, communal spaces, and burial areas. The settlement appears to have been densely organized, with a clear sense of planning and social structure. Mainstream archaeology interprets Los Millares as a fortified community, likely inhabited by a society that was developing early forms of social hierarchy. The presence of elite burials, with rich grave goods, suggests differentiation within the population. The fortifications may have protected not only the inhabitants but also resources, livestock, and trade goods. The settlement's location near the river valley would have provided access to water, agriculture, and routes for exchange. Yet the site raises deeper questions. The sheer effort required to build and maintain such fortifications suggests a constant concern with conflict. Was Los Millares under threat from neighboring groups, or was the fortification itself a statement of power, meant to deter potential enemies? The walls are not merely defensive, they are symbolic. They create a boundary between inside and outside, between those who belong and those who do not. What did the builders fear, and what did they hope to protect? The internal layout of Los Millares is also intriguing. The houses are arranged in clusters, with narrow pathways between them. The settlement seems densely packed, suggesting a community living in close proximity. The arrangement implies a degree of social organization, possibly including rules about space, access, and communal life. The presence of communal areas hints at shared activities, perhaps related to food, craft, or ritual. The settlement was not just a fortress, it was a living community. The burial practices at Los Millares add another layer of mystery. The site includes tholos tombs, beehive-shaped burial structures built with stone. These tombs contain multiple burials, often with grave goods such as pottery, weapons, and ornaments. The presence of such tombs indicates a society that placed importance on the treatment of the dead and on the display of status. The tombs are not only places of burial, but also monuments to social identity. Who was buried here, and why were some tombs more elaborate than others? The combination of fortifications and elaborate burials suggests a society in which power and protection were intertwined. The settlement appears to have been both a place of daily life and a center of social control. The walls may have been designed not only to keep outsiders out, but to regulate movement within the community. The architecture itself may have been a tool of governance. More speculative theories consider the possibility that Los Millares was part of a wider network of fortified settlements, connected by trade, alliance, or shared cultural identity. The site's location near the coast and its access to inland routes could have made it a hub of exchange. If so, the fortifications could have served not only defensive purposes, but also economic ones, protecting resources and controlling trade. The settlement may have been a center of power in a region undergoing significant change. Other theories focus on the symbolic meaning of the walls. The concentric fortifications could represent not only defense, but also cosmology, an architectural expression of order, boundary, and sacred space. The multiple rings of walls might mirror concepts of the world, the community, or the relationship between the living and the dead. The architecture could have been a way of mapping social and spiritual order onto the landscape. The presence of metalworking at Los Millares is also significant. The Copper Age was a time of emerging technological innovation, and Los Millares shows evidence of early metallurgy. Copper tools and weapons were found at the site, indicating that the community had access to metal resources and the knowledge to work them. Metalworking implies specialized skill and the possibility of trade networks for raw materials. Who controlled the metal, and how did it shape social power? The presence of metal may have been both practical and symbolic, signaling status and technological advantage. The decline of Los Millares is another mystery. Around 2200 BCE, the site appears to have been abandoned, and the reasons for this abandonment are not fully understood. Climate change, social upheaval, conflict, or economic shifts are all possible factors. The settlement's decline coincides with broader changes in the region, suggesting that Los Millares was part of a larger transformation. Yet the exact cause remains uncertain. Why was such a significant settlement left behind? Some theories propose that the abandonment was sudden and violent, perhaps due to conflict or disaster. Others suggest a gradual decline, with the community moving to new locations or reorganizing socially. The evidence is open to interpretation, and the lack of written records means that the story remains partly hidden in the ruins. The walls remain, but the people who built them are gone. Walking through Los Millares today, the scale of the fortifications is still imposing. The walls rise in layers, and the pathways between houses feel narrow and intentional. The site has a sense of order, but also of tension. The architecture suggests a society that lived with the constant awareness of outside threat. Yet it also suggests a community capable of remarkable organization and shared purpose. Los Millares challenges assumptions about early societies. It suggests that complex social structures, fortifications, and metallurgy emerged earlier than we might expect. The site is not simply a settlement. It is a monument to social complexity and the human capacity for large-scale construction. It is a place where the past feels close, where the stones still speak of labor, fear, and power. And so the mystery of Los Millares remains. What drove the builders to create such a fortified settlement, and what did they hope to protect? What social structures allowed the community to coordinate such a project, and what caused its eventual abandonment? The walls stand as a reminder that ancient structures can be both known and unknowable. They offer evidence, but not certainty, and they invite us to ask what else might still be hidden beneath the earth. What stories remain buried in the ruins, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered? The stones of Los Millares begin to fade from the mind like a memory of a storm. Walls, towers, and the unmistakable weight of human intention pressed into the landscape. But the shift from fortress to funerary monument is not a change in purpose so much as a change in direction. Where Los Millares guarded the living, the Tumulus of Bougon seems to guard what comes after. The transition is subtle, almost seamless. From the architecture of defense to the architecture of remembrance, both built from the same raw material, stone, shaped by hands that understood how to make the earth speak. In the quiet countryside of western France, near the town of Bougon, a series of low, rounded mounds rises gently from the fields. At first, they look like natural hills, soft, unassuming, almost pastoral. But as you draw nearer, the contours reveal themselves as deliberate, constructed forms. These are tumuli, earthen mounds built over chambers of stone. The landscape here is not a blank canvas. It is a layered record of human presence, where the living have shaped the ground to hold the dead. The Tumulus of Bougon is not a single monument, but a complex of several burial mounds, each with its own internal structure and character. From above, the mounds form a pattern, an arrangement that suggests planning and intention. The largest mound, known as Tumulus A, dominates the site with its broad, rounded form. It is an ancient hill that hides a more intricate world beneath its surface. Chambers, corridors, and the careful placement of massive stones. To stand near it is to feel the weight of time itself, as if the earth has been folded over secrets that refuse to be fully revealed. The tumuli at Bougon date to the early Neolithic, roughly between 4,800 and 4,000 BCE. This makes them some of the oldest monumental structures in Western Europe. Their construction required a level of organization and labor that implies a community capable of sustained collective effort. The builders of Bougon were not merely gathering stones and piling earth. They were creating an enduring architecture of memory, one that would outlast the individuals who conceived it. Inside the mounds, the chambers are constructed with large slabs of stone, fitted together with a precision that is both practical and impressive. The corridors leading into the burial rooms are narrow and deliberate, forcing anyone who enters to move slowly, almost reverently. The stones themselves are heavy and imposing, yet they are arranged in ways that suggest care and intention rather than brute force. The interior spaces are dark and still, the air cool and damp, with a silence that feels almost engineered. It is a silence that seems to have been built into the stones, as if the architecture itself was designed to preserve not only bodies, but the quiet of the world beyond life. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that the chambers were used for multiple burials over long periods. The dead were placed within the stone rooms, and the mounds were sealed and then reopened in later generations. This practice suggests a belief system that connected the living and the dead across time, perhaps treating the ancestors as ongoing participants in community life. The repeated use of the chambers implies a continuity of ritual and memory, a refusal to let the past become distant. The artifacts found within the tumuli add to the complexity of the site. Flint tools, pottery, and personal items have been discovered, suggesting that the dead were buried with objects that held meaning, either practical or symbolic. Some of the objects show signs of careful craftsmanship, indicating that the people who built Bougon possessed specialized skills and artistic sensibilities. The presence of these items raises questions about the social structure of the community. Were some individuals honored more than others? Were the burials organized according to status, lineage, or role? Yet the stones of Bougon also invite questions that remain unanswered. Why was this particular landscape chosen? The site is not on a prominent hill or a dramatic overlook, but in a more modest setting, surrounded by fields and gentle terrain. Was the choice driven by proximity to resources, by tradition, or by something less tangible, perhaps a sense of sacredness tied to the land itself? The arrangement of the tumuli suggests a deliberate spatial logic. The mounds are not placed randomly. They form a pattern that could be read as a map of ritual or social order. Some researchers have suggested that the site may have been aligned with celestial events, or that the orientation of the chambers reflects a connection to the movements of the sun and the seasons. The idea of astronomical alignment is difficult to prove definitively, but the possibility adds another layer to the mystery. If the builders were orienting their burial architecture to the sky, what did they see in the heavens? What did the sun's path mean to them? There are also more speculative interpretations. Some suggest that the tumuli were not only tombs, but also places of initiation or communal gathering. The chambers could have served as spaces where rituals were performed, where the living sought contact with the dead, or where the community reaffirmed its identity. The notion of the dead as active participants in social life is common in many ancient cultures. Could Bougon have been a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was deliberately blurred? Another intriguing aspect is the possibility that the mounds served as a kind of territorial marker. The act of constructing large monuments on the landscape can be seen as a claim to land, a statement of presence. The tumuli could have been a way for early communities to assert ownership or to define the limits of their territory. But if so, why choose burial mounds rather than more visible markers? Perhaps because the dead, in their permanence, offered a more enduring claim. The stones themselves hold another kind of mystery. The effort required to quarry, transport, and shape the slabs suggests a knowledge of engineering and a level of social coordination that is difficult to fully grasp from our distance in time. How did these communities organize such labor? What social structures supported the work? And what drove them to invest so much into monuments that were, in the end, dedicated to death? Even today, the tumuli of Bougon are not fully understood. Excavations have revealed much, but the site continues to guard its deepest meanings. The chambers, with their quiet darkness and heavy stones, remain as they were built, a place where the past is both present and hidden. Walking among the mounds, one cannot help but feel the weight of human intention pressed into the earth. The stones are silent, but their arrangement speaks of beliefs, rituals, and a worldview that we can only partially reconstruct. And perhaps that is the true mystery of Bougon, not the fact of its existence, but the fact that it continues to resist a single, definitive explanation. What did the builders of Bougon hope to achieve with their mounds? What did they believe about death, memory, and the afterlife? And what other meanings might still be buried beneath the earth, waiting for another generation to uncover them? As the light shifts across the tumuli, the question remains: what else is hidden in the stones? What knowledge, what rituals, what echoes of a world that once saw the dead as a living presence among the living? Beyond the visible mounds, the Tumulus of Bougon speaks to a deeper relationship between people and their environment, one that is not merely utilitarian but profoundly symbolic. The builders did not simply occupy the land. They transformed it into a stage for memory. The very act of raising earth and stone into a lasting form suggests a belief in permanence, in leaving behind something that would outlive the fragile span of a human life. In this way, the tumuli are not only tombs, but statements, bold, quiet, and enduring, about the desire to be remembered. The tactile experience of Bougon is also a reminder that prehistoric life was not separate from the physical world, but inseparable from it. The stones are not decorative. They are the raw materials of survival, shaped into a language of meaning. The labor of moving and positioning the slabs was an act of collective devotion, and the very weight of the stones implies a social structure capable of coordinating time, effort, and purpose. Each stone, each passage, each chamber is a record of human cooperation, an architectural testament to the shared will of a community. Yet the mounds do not only speak of death, they also speak of continuity, of the cycles of human existence that repeat across generations. The repeated reopening of chambers suggests that the dead were not forgotten but revisited, their presence integrated into the ongoing life of the community. In this sense, the tumuli may have functioned as a kind of living archive, where the past was not sealed away but woven into the present. The dead were not merely laid to rest, they were kept near, perhaps consulted, perhaps honored, perhaps remembered in ritual that reinforced the bonds of the living. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Bougon is how it challenges modern assumptions about ancient people. We tend to imagine prehistoric communities as primitive or simple, but the sophistication of these structures reveals a complex worldview, one that included not only practical knowledge of construction, but also an understanding of time, memory, and the power of place. The tumuli are not relics of a lost, rudimentary past. They are the remains of a civilization that understood how to make the earth itself a monument, and how to use stone to speak across millennia. The tumuli of Bougon recede behind us, their silent mounds rising like ancient questions pressed into the earth. But the transition from one megalithic monument to another is not a departure from mystery. It is a continuation. If Bougon was a landscape of burial and remembrance, then the next site we approach is a more intimate architecture of passage and threshold. We leave the broad, rounded hills and step toward a narrower opening in the earth, where stone becomes a corridor rather than a chamber. The shift is subtle, yet it changes the nature of the experience. Here, the dead are not simply housed, they are moved through. In the Breton countryside, not far from the coastal edges of France, stands the Kercado passage grave. Unlike the tumuli at Bougon, which are large and dispersed, Kercado is a compact monument, a passage tomb built with a precision that suggests a careful understanding of structure. From a distance, it might appear as a simple mound or a low rise in the ground. But as you approach, the stones reveal themselves, a narrow passage leading to an inner chamber, framed by large slabs that have been carefully placed to create a sense of intentional entry. The passage grave is a familiar form in Neolithic Europe, yet each example carries its own distinct character. Kercado is part of the broader tradition of passage tombs in Brittany, a region rich in megalithic architecture. The monument is typically dated to the late Neolithic, around 4,500 to 3,500 BCE, placing it within a period when communities across Europe were building increasingly complex structures. The passage tomb form suggests a deliberate connection between the living and the dead, as well as a desire to create a controlled environment for ritual and memory. What makes Kercado striking is the sense of deliberate confinement. The passage is narrow, the stones close, the air cool and still. As you move inward, the world outside fades, and the chamber becomes a space that is both protective and isolating. The architecture forces a particular posture. You must move slowly, with attention, as if the stones demand a form of respect. The tomb is not merely a resting place. It is a controlled environment, a constructed threshold between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Archaeologists have found evidence that passage graves were used for collective burial. Bodies were placed within the chamber over time, often in multiple stages. The practice suggests a communal approach to death, where the tomb served as a shared repository for the dead, perhaps a place where ancestors were honored collectively. The repeated use of the chamber implies a continuity of ritual and memory, a link between generations that extends beyond individual lifespans. The internal structure of Kercado reveals a careful use of stone. The slabs are arranged to create a stable corridor, with the chamber at the end forming a kind of sacred heart. The stones are not only functional, they are symbolic. The act of passing through a narrow corridor into a hidden chamber is a powerful image. It suggests a journey, a transition, a movement from one state of being to another. In many ancient cultures, death was understood as a passage rather than an end. The passage grave, then, may be a physical expression of that belief. The question that lingers is, what did the builders intend for those who entered? Was the passage meant to be walked by the living during rituals, or was it a symbolic corridor that represented the soul's journey? The architecture itself does not provide a definitive answer, but it invites us to consider the relationship between movement, space, and belief. The passage is narrow enough to make the act of entering a deliberate choice. It is not a casual entry. It is a commitment to a ritual of transition. The placement of the monument also raises questions. Many passage graves in Brittany are situated in landscapes that offer wide views, aligning with horizons or notable features in the terrain. Kercado, however, is somewhat more secluded, tucked into the landscape in a way that feels private, almost hidden. This seclusion could suggest a deliberate intention to create a space removed from daily life, a place where the community could gather in a controlled environment. But it could also imply something else, that the tomb was meant to be a hidden threshold, known only to those who were initiated into its purpose. Some researchers have suggested that the passage tombs of Brittany, including Kercado, may have served as markers of territory or as centers of social cohesion. The act of constructing such a monument would require coordination, labor, and shared belief. It may have been a way for communities to assert identity and continuity. Yet the intimate scale of Kercado complicates this idea. If the monument were meant primarily as a public statement, why create such a narrow, inward-focused structure? The answer may lie in the dual nature of passage graves. They are both communal and deeply personal. Beyond the mainstream interpretations, there are more speculative theories. Some propose that the alignment of passage tombs may reflect astronomical knowledge, with the passage acting as a channel for light at specific times of the year. The idea of a tomb that captures sunlight on solstices or equinoxes is compelling, and it has been observed in other passage graves across Europe. If Kercado were aligned in this way, the moment when light reaches the chamber could have been seen as a symbolic reanimation of the dead, or a moment of renewal for the living. Yet the evidence for such alignments is not always conclusive, and the exact purpose of these architectural choices remains uncertain. Other theories suggest that passage tombs were used for initiatory rituals, perhaps involving the temporary confinement of participants within the chamber. The narrow passage and enclosed space could have created a sensory experience that altered perception, inducing a trance-like state. The use of stone as a tool for shaping experience is not implausible. Many ancient cultures used architecture to influence ritual states. But such interpretations are difficult to prove and remain speculative. Still, they highlight the fact that the passage grave is not only a tomb, it is a designed environment, one that affects those who enter. The stones of Kercado also hold their own quiet mysteries. The effort required to source and transport large slabs, to shape them and fit them together, suggests a level of organization and engineering skill that is difficult to fully reconstruct. How did these communities coordinate such work? What social structures supported the labor? And why invest so much in a monument dedicated to death? The answers may lie in the importance of ancestors to Neolithic communities, or in the need to create enduring symbols of identity and continuity. But the stones themselves do not offer a simple explanation. The passage grave remains, in many ways, a threshold that refuses to be fully crossed. Its chambers are silent, and its stones keep their secrets. Yet the structure continues to speak through its form, inviting us to consider the beliefs of those who built it. What did they see when they entered the passage? What did the darkness mean to them? And what did they hope to achieve by constructing a corridor that leads into the earth? As the light shifts across the stones and the air grows still, the question remains: what lies beyond the threshold of Kercado, not just in the chamber, but in the minds of the people who built it? What beliefs, what rituals, what understanding of life and death were encoded in this narrow passage? The tomb offers no answers, only the enduring invitation to wonder. The passage grave of Kercado fades behind us, its narrow corridor and dark chamber lingering in the mind like a doorway that was never meant to be fully understood. But the journey continues, and the landscape changes again. This time to the Mediterranean island of Sardinia, where the terrain is rugged and the sky opens wide above ancient stone. Here, the megalithic tradition takes on a different scale, a different rhythm. Where Kercado's architecture was intimate and inward, Sardinia's monuments often feel expansive and outward-facing, as if the island itself has been shaped by a culture that saw the landscape as a canvas for monumental expression. Among Sardinia's most iconic ancient structures is the giant's tomb of Coddu Vecchiu. The name alone carries a weight of legend. Giants, those larger-than-life figures that populate the myths of many cultures. But the tomb is not a product of myth alone. It is a real, tangible structure, built with immense stone slabs and designed with a purpose that still echoes across millennia. Standing before it, the first impression is of scale. The monument is long and imposing, its central corridor flanked by stone walls that rise like a stern, silent embrace. Coddu Vecchiu is a giant's tomb, a type of collective burial monument associated with the Nuragic civilization of Sardinia, which flourished in the Bronze Age, roughly between 1800 and 1000 BCE. These tombs are not simple graves. They are long rectangular structures with a central burial chamber, often covered by a mound of earth and stone. The entrance is usually marked by a large vertical stone slab, creating a dramatic threshold. At Coddu Vecchiu, the monument is particularly well preserved, allowing visitors to see the full form of the tomb and to sense its original presence in the landscape. The term giant's tomb comes from later local traditions, which attributed these massive structures to mythical giants. The Nuragic people themselves did not leave written records that explain their beliefs. So much of what we understand about the tombs comes from archaeology and interpretation. The sheer size of the monument, however, suggests a community that was capable of organizing significant labor and resources. The tomb was not built for a single individual. It was a collective space, intended to hold many dead over time. Approaching Coddu Vecchiu, one is struck by the monument's alignment with the landscape. The tomb is situated in a place that offers broad views of the surrounding terrain, and the long shape of the structure seems to draw the eye along its length toward the horizon. The entrance, framed by the imposing stele or vertical slab, creates a focal point, as if the monument were designed to be seen from a distance. The tomb is both a burial site and a statement, a physical reminder of a community's presence and continuity. Inside, the burial chamber is long and narrow, with stone slabs forming the walls and ceiling. The space is dark and cool, and the air feels ancient, as if the stones have absorbed centuries of silence. The chamber's length implies a procession of the dead, a continuation of burial over generations. The architecture suggests a belief in the importance of collective memory, where the dead were not isolated but gathered together in a shared space. The tomb is a place of containment, but also of connection, between individuals, between generations, between the living and the dead. Archaeological studies indicate that these tombs were used for collective burial, and that the dead were placed within the chamber over time. The practice may have involved rituals of remembrance, offerings, or ceremonies that reinforced community identity. The Nuragic civilization is known for its distinctive stone towers, the Nuragi, which were also built with great skill and effort. The giants' tombs, like Coddu Vecchiu, represent another facet of Nuragic society, a culture that used stone not only for defense and settlement, but also for the sacred work of burial. The architecture of Coddu Vecchiu raises questions about the beliefs that shaped it. Why build a tomb of such scale? What did the collective burial represent? In many cultures, communal tombs are associated with ancestor worship, the idea that the dead continue to influence the living. Did the Nuragic people believe that the dead remained present in the community, watching over the living? Or was the tomb a way of containing the dead, keeping them together and separate from the world of the living? The structure's design suggests a complex relationship with death, one that is not easily reduced to a single explanation. The monument also invites speculation about its symbolic meaning. The long rectangular form, the central chamber, and the imposing entrance create an image of a body, an architectural representation of a collective entity. The stele at the entrance could be seen as a guardian, a marker, or a symbolic threshold. The tomb's length could represent a journey, a procession, or a passage through time. The architecture itself seems to tell a story, even if the story is not fully known. More speculative theories extend the mystery further. Some suggest that the giants' tombs may have been aligned with celestial events, or that their form reflects a cosmological worldview. The idea that the tomb could function as a kind of stone calendar or a marker of seasonal cycles is intriguing, especially given the importance of astronomy in many ancient cultures. If the entrance were oriented toward a particular point on the horizon, could the tomb have been used to track the sun's movement? Or was the alignment more symbolic, connecting the dead to the sky and the wider cosmos? Other interpretations propose that the tombs served as sites for initiation rituals, or as places where the community gathered for seasonal ceremonies. The long chamber could have been a space for communal activities, not only for burial. The idea of the tomb as a multifunctional space is difficult to confirm, but it highlights the fact that ancient monuments often served multiple purposes, blending practical, ritual, and symbolic functions. The name Giant's Tomb itself suggests a cultural memory that has persisted through time. Why did later generations attribute these structures to giants? Was it simply a way of explaining the tomb's impressive scale, or did it reflect a deeper sense of awe and mystery? The attribution to giants may hint at a recognition that the builders belonged to a distant, almost mythical past. The tombs were not only ancient, they were beyond ordinary comprehension. The stones of Coddu Vecchiu also speak to the technical skill of the Nuragic people. The construction required knowledge of stoneworking, transport, and structural stability. The effort involved in building such a monument suggests a society with specialized labor and social organization. How did they coordinate such work? What motivated them to invest so much into a tomb? The answers may lie in the importance of the ancestors, the need for social cohesion, or a belief in the power of stone to anchor memory. Yet, despite the archaeological understanding, the tomb remains a place of unanswered questions. The absence of written records leaves room for interpretation, and the monument continues to resist a single definitive explanation. The stones are silent, but their presence is powerful, a reminder that the past is not only something we study, but something we encounter. As the sun shifts across the Sardinian landscape and the long shadows of the tomb stretch outward, the question remains: what did the builders of Coddu Vecchiu hope to achieve with this monumental structure? What beliefs, what rituals, what understanding of death and community were encoded in the stone? And what else might still be hidden, not only within the tomb itself, but in the culture that created it?